Marvel's master of multiversal magic. Hey, fanfic family. So glad to see you here again to continue this incredible adventure. As always, kindly remember, this story is 100% fiction, so don't go looking for dimensional portals in your closet. All rights to this fantastic novel belong to the original author. We're just your humble narrators of epic tales. Are you enjoying the fanfic? Show it by subscribing to our YouTube channel and dropping us a like. And if you're impatient for more exclusive content, our Patreon is your happy place. Chapter 476. Good, you've got guts. It's no use. I've tried many methods, but none of them worked. Mavis, you can't do it either. Perhaps only Natsu can. He's the strongest demon I created. So, I'm sorry, but I can only ask these mages of your guild to die. With that, he stood up and turned to walk towards the back of the palace, ignoring Mavis's shouts. I'm tired. Kill everyone except Natsu, then send their corpses back to the eastern continent with Natsu. That's it. Mavis's appearance had shaken his resolve, so he couldn't stay any longer. He needed to maintain a cold heart, to seal away all love, so that the curse wouldn't erupt and he could continue his plan. Damn, so that's the reason. Hearing Zareth and Mavis's conversation, George finally understood what was going on. So, Zareth wanted to provoke Natsu by killing them, to make Natsu grow in hatred and then kill him to break the curse. What a crazy idea. It's not that it's impossible. Natsu is the strongest demon, possesses dragon power, and is proficient in so much magic, immortal and ageless. There's plenty of time to nurture him. Why go to such an extreme? He's probably been cursed for so many years, his mind isn't quite right. Yes, your majesty. Hearing Zareth's order, the Spriggan 12 bowed respectfully, but after Zareth left, they exchanged bewildered glances. They only now realized that their emperor had been seeking death all along. I say, gentlemen, you don't want your emperor to die, do you? So I think perhaps we can try to persuade him again, George suggested, sensing something in the Spriggan 12's expressions. Zareth wanted to die, but clearly his subjects didn't. Killing them on orders, only to have Natsu kill Zareth later, wasn't the outcome they wanted either. So there was still room for negotiation. No need to persuade him. Just kill Natsu too, isn't that enough? Larcade, revived by the Magic King, stepped forward again. The strongest demon. I am the strongest demon my father created, that makes sense. I'll take action. We'll say we didn't control the power properly and accidentally killed him. I do this kind of thing all the time. The Desert King clearly agreed with Larcade's idea. The other members of the Spriggan 12 remained silent, but their expressions showed their tacit agreement. Even if it meant disobeying Zareth's orders, they wouldn't allow Zareth to potentially die at Natsu's hands in the future. Zareth, who had already left the palace, had long anticipated all of this. Natsu, how can you grow without experiencing true despair? If you truly perish in your growth, then I'll have to use the last resort. He knew the Spriggan 12 wouldn't let Natsu go, but that was the effect he wanted. If Natsu survived this battle, he would undoubtedly grow tremendously, and the hatred in the hearts of his fallen comrades would make Natsu even stronger. Only in this way could he possibly kill him. If they don't survive, it means this method won't work either, and the only option left is to attack the eastern continent, fuse with the fairy's heart, and go back in time to rewrite history. Alright, this guild master actually prefers to let strength speak for itself. I rarely want to resolve things peacefully, but since you insist on this, then let's fight. At this point, words are useless. Sure enough, persuasion usually only works after you've won them over with a fight. Let's change locations. George lightly stomped his foot, and the marble floor of the entire palace, which was like glass, instantly softened, sucking everyone into the mirror world. Fighting directly in the palace might harm many ordinary people in the capital. Fighting in this space won't have so many concerns. Of course, he wasn't afraid of harming ordinary people in the capital, but he was worried that with so many Dragon Slayer mages, the Black Dragon might be attracted during the battle. He was somewhat confident with Zareth and the Spriggan 12, but with a Black Dragon added, it was hard to say. Useless. Do you really think you can harm the capital? I alone can wipe you all out without them even lifting a finger. The Desert King didn't appreciate George's words, but he didn't object either, as did the others. One person? Is that really true? George, who had originally planned to reveal his dragon form and fight, immediately changed his mind after hearing the Desert King's words. The first Mavis, standing beside him, quietly said to George, "George, I think we should retreat now. Even if we can defeat one, there are still 11 behind." Mavis, who held the title of fairy strategist, knew very well that this battle was doomed to be lost. Each of the 12 people in front of them was exceptionally strong, far beyond the current strength of the guild's mages. Even if George was powerful, how many could he defeat? Retreating at the last minute would inevitably result in casualties, so it was better to retreat now while everyone was still unharmed and in their best condition. "Guildmaster Mavis, it's all right, I know what I'm doing. This is a rare opportunity." George waved his hand, giving Mavis a reassuring look. Indeed, given the current strength of the guild mages, even if they joined forces, they couldn't possibly defeat the Spriggan 12 if they disregarded him. They were simply not in the same league. However, dealing with just one or two wasn't impossible. Especially someone like Natsu, who possessed immense potential, capable of extraordinary bursts of power in dangerous situations, and incredibly resilient. Since the enemy wasn't planning to swarm them, but arrogantly believed he could handle them all alone, he could conveniently use them as targets, honing their skills one by one. He could heal those seriously injured and replenish their mana. After all, he was initially known for his support abilities. Regardless of how many he ultimately defeated, the guild mage's strength would undoubtedly improve significantly after this battle. He could strike when the enemy realized they were about to swarm him. It wasn't that he was overconfident, given his abilities. Unless he encountered an enemy significantly stronger than himself, he could be defeated quickly, making numbers irrelevant. Because his magic power is practically limitless, and his physical constitution allows him to regenerate infinitely with magic power, he could fight continuously for thousands of years without any problem. When facing Zeref just now, his intuition told him that Zeref's strength shouldn't be much greater than his own at full power. The key is that Zeref, the greatest threat, is now gone. The Desert King, keep my word. None of you should make a move. I'll bury them all in my desert." The Desert King was shrouded in sand, his face filled with arrogance. "Fine, you've got guts." George made a large catpaw gesture at the Desert King. Chapter 477 Gang Fight. "Everyone, you've all seen the situation. If we retreat immediately, they'll think we're weak and will likely launch a war against the Eastern continent soon. So this time, our goal is to defeat as many of them as possible before retreating. This way, they'll be hesitant to act, and we'll have more time to buy ourselves when we get back." After making a big paw gesture towards the Desert King, George solemnly addressed Natsu and the other fairy tale mages. "This time, it's all up to you. Fairy tale, victory. To achieve the desired effect, it's not enough to just deceive the enemy, you also need to convince your own people. Otherwise, if everyone feels he's there to protect them, it'll be difficult to break through and thrive in dire circumstances. Fortunately, most of the guild members are simple-minded and hot-blooded, so even if his explanation is somewhat far-fetched, it's not a big problem. Besides, everyone has only been back for 3 days and doesn't yet know his true strength, so they probably don't really believe he can handle things. Even the smarter ones, under the influence of the atmosphere, probably won't think much of it. Victory's certain." Sure enough, when George raised his paw and made the classic fairy tale guild gesture, everyone instantly became fired up. They all raised the same gesture and shouted. What else was there to say? Just fight. Follow the guild leader and crush those Spriggan 12. Fairy tale is the strongest now. Charge. George waved his paw, and the fairy tale mages charged fiercely towards the Desert King. Their astonishing momentum startled all the Spriggan 12. Transformation, armor of the heavenly wheel, roar of the fire dragon, roar of the heavenly dragon, roar of the thunder dragon, exorcise evil and reveal justice. One day, 7-star sword, one spell after another flew out, instantly engulfing the Desert King. However, the Desert King, as a Spriggan 12 mage on par with the leader of the 4 heavenly kings of Ishgir, was no mere figurehead. A violent sandstorm rose up, actually managing to withstand the first wave of attacks. However, as he withstood the attacks, his expression turned serious. Clearly, the fairy tale mage's magical power exceeded his expectations and put him under considerable pressure. But having already made that boast, his pride wouldn't allow him to ask for help, so he gritted his teeth and began the battle. It seems I underestimated them somewhat. On the other side, George didn't go to help, but muttered in surprise. The strength Natsu and his group were displaying was indeed much stronger than he remembered. But thinking about it carefully, it made sense. His impression of Natsu and his group's strength was still from the Civil War era. Later, he went to the northern continent, and Natsu and his group experienced the battles against the Oracion Seas, Edalis, and Tenrao Island, so their strength had increased significantly, which was normal. There's still no chance of winning, especially with those two. Here in George's words, Anna, who also didn't go up, still looked uneasy. As a celestial spirit mage, most of her strength came from celestial spirits, and she had left her celestial spirit key to her descendants, so going up wouldn't be of much help. However, with her experience, she knew very well that even if she could defeat the Desert King, or even several more of the 12 shields, victory would be difficult in the end. The Magic King and the red-haired female mage beside him exuded an immense sense of oppression. That oppression was only slightly less than that of Zareth. George, with your magic, I can possess you and manipulate the magic within you. If we can't win in a while, I'll cast Fairy Sphere to build a defense, and you can use special magic to teleport everyone away. Mavis, on the other side, had already begun preparing a retreat plan. Although George had learned Fairy Sphere, his mastery of it was only enough to protect 2 or 3 people at most. But if she were given control of the magic, she could create a Fairy Sphere that enveloped all the guild members, one that even Zareth couldn't break in a short time. Once the Fairy Sphere was complete, George would control the magic and cast special magic from within to evacuate everyone. It's alright, no rush, no rush. George waved his cat paw, watching the battle with great interest. He had been researching and improving his magic, as had Natsu and the others, so he had witnessed many new spells developed by Natsu and his team during this battle. These spells were also somewhat inspiring to him. We won. In less than 5 minutes, the Desert King couldn't hold on any longer. The fairy tale mages, fueled by their passion, coordinated perfectly. Their combat power was off the charts, all performing beyond their usual limits. At that moment, George flashed forward, catching the Desert King who had been knocked unconscious by Urza's final blow, and immediately activated his soul search mode, sweeping away all the magic from his mind. What was his purpose in rushing to the Western continent? Was it to defeat the Black Dragon? Was it to stop the war between the East and West continents? Was it to cooperate with Zareth? Actually, none of those were the main purposes. He could have come 2 years later. His primary purpose was to plunder all the valuable magic on the Western continent, especially the forbidden magic in Zareth's mind. The magic of the Eastern continent had already greatly benefited him, and the Western continent was even stronger, so its magic was naturally no less impressive. His ultimate goal in all his world clones was to increase his own strength. Only on this basis would he attend to secondary matters. For example, because he had developed a connection with the guild, as its leader, he would let everyone hone their skills instead of directly conquering everything himself. It would only take a few hours anyway. He currently had many clones, and as each clone's strength increased, it would boost the strength of the clones in other worlds. The increased strength of the clones in other worlds would allow them to acquire more resources for further improvement, which would then benefit the clones in other worlds. This was a virtuous cycle. Therefore, in his view, as long as it was safe to do so, risking one's life to acquire resources was worthwhile. For example, before coming to the Western continent, although he wasn't sure if he could defeat Zareth, as long as he was certain he could escape, he would still come. Because after acquiring the magic of the Western continent, his strength would increase, and the strength of his clones in other worlds would also increase. Perhaps this improvement would allow the clones in other worlds to do things they couldn't do before. If the Avatar in Middle-earth were to grow powerful enough, it could slay Morgoth, travel to the land of the gods to learn from the gods, become even stronger, and then feed back to the Avatar in the fairy tale world. Once the Avatar in the fairy tale world becomes stronger, it might be able to easily annihilate the Black Dragon. Chapter 478 The Magic of Lust. Of course, this is just an example. In reality, the more clones there are, the better the effect. Therefore, when there is profit to be made, he won't choose to be too cautious and wait for his clones in other worlds to become stronger before taking advantage of them without harm. Because if every clone thinks this way, the final increase in strength will be very slow. Moreover, when it's time to take them down without harm, the benefit of the clone in that world might no longer be important. Clones are important, they are the foundation of strength, but they shouldn't be considered too important. As long as there is enough benefit, even if the clone is sacrificed, it's acceptable. For example, if a clone in a certain world can absorb some rare treasure and increase its strength 100-fold, but the price is being killed afterwards, That's not unacceptable. Compared to these clones, what's truly important is the main body. If the main body is harmed, perhaps no new clones will be created. Except for the Marvel main world where he might be more cautious. In other clone worlds, he can be cautious when there's no benefit, but when there is, he should be aggressive. Agile actually lost to this bunch of trash. What a disgrace. Seeing the Desert King knocked unconscious, Larcade stepped forward again. Let me handle them. He hadn't been paying attention and had been ambushed by that cat's sleep magic. If he didn't get his revenge, how could he face everyone afterward? Be careful, Magic King Augusta warned Larcade as he stepped forward again. As the leader of the 12 Shields, he hated Larcade the most. He was always late for meetings and always acted like he was his father's son. After all, he was Zeraf's real biological son. But now wasn't the time to dwell on such things. Unlike the others, he wasn't optimistic about the current situation. The cat had remained too calm throughout, making him uneasy. The others believed the Desert King and Larcade could handle the enemy alone and didn't bother to intervene, but he wanted to use them to test the enemy's strength. If Larcade lost again, he would immediately order the other 9 to attack him simultaneously. HMPH, I was just careless. Have you all forgotten that I'm Father's secret weapon against technologia? Larcade sneered, then his body erupted with a dazzling white light, enveloping everyone in his field of vision. Let me show you the horror of desire. Most of the fairy tale mages who had been charging towards Larcade suddenly blushed, their bodies went limp, and they collapsed to the ground, unable to help but let out inexplicable cries. This magic actually arouses lust, not only those fighting in the front, but even George, who had just healed everyone and returned to the rear to provide cover, was now affected. Larcade's magic didn't affect the surface of the mind and body, otherwise, with the strength of his mind and body, he could easily dispel it. This magic actually targeted lust, one of the 7 emotions and 6 desires. Even if he used his powerful mental strength to constantly wash it away, he could only slightly alleviate it, not completely eliminate it. No wonder it was said to be effective against the Black Dragon, who is immune to magic. Of course, this magic doesn't cause direct harm. As long as one's will is strong enough, and one defeats Larcade while constantly resisting the onslaught of lust, everything will be fine. However, most mages in this combat state would probably only be able to unleash about 10% of their full strength. Heaven and earth, mysterious origin, root of all key, cultivate through countless tribulations, prove my divine power, George chanted rapidly, a layer of golden light covering his body, instantly dissipating most of his desires. Fortunately, Taoist techniques are the best counter to this kind of thing, using the golden light spell he had just learned with his new clone to resist Larcade's lust magic, and after basically returning to normal, he looked around. It seems that not everyone's lust can be aroused, one must have experienced it firsthand. Upon closer inspection, he realized that Larcade's lust magic was indeed powerful, able to bypass mental defenses, but it also had significant weaknesses. He discovered that many people were not affected by Larcade's lust magic. For example, Natsu, Lucy, Gray, and Wendy, who had never experienced sexual pleasure, were all normal and maintained their full combat power. Those like Gilderts, Laxus, and Minerva, who were married with children and had already experienced sexual intercourse, were practically unable to stand. This magic was practically a virginity detector. To be honest, he wasn't surprised by most of them, but a few did surprise him. He hadn't expected Jelil and Urza to be affected, which meant that Jelil and Urza had already had relations during his time in the Northland. Gadgiel and Levi were also affected, while the sexy cover girl Mara Jane was unaffected. What surprised him most was that Mavis, who had become a ghost, was also affected. Larcade's magic actually worked on the dead, and the relationship between Mavis and Zeraf was probably more than just a kiss. Mavis said she was cursed to death because of Zeraf's kiss. Now it seems there must have been a considerable amount of foreplay before the kiss. Speaking of which, Mavis was probably in her 20s at the time, but her body was in a lolly state, and Zeraf was quite capable of doing that. Looks like we can't win without top-tier fighters like Gilderts, Jelil, Laxus, and Urza. Minerva and the rest of the original Saberby Tiger were basically wiped out. Natsu, Gray, and Lucy alone were far from enough to fight someone of Larcade's caliber. Even though they were badly injured, and George was casting healing spells from time to time, they were still no match. It's time to end this. Seeing Natsu and the others, healed by George, charging at him again and again, Growing stronger with each attack, Larcade grew impatient. Desire implantation, he clapped his hands, and countless white tentacles flew out, trapping Natsu and the others. Even though they hadn't experienced it, they were forcibly infused with desire, losing their fighting ability. These tentacles seem stronger, but they're easy to defend against. George dodged the attack of over a dozen tentacles, wielding a large wave of divine sharpness spells, severing the tentacles on the spot. Previous erotic magic was activated in the form of light, making it difficult to predict and dodge, but ineffective against pure individuals. These tentacles, however, are effective against everyone, yet easily dodged and destroyed. Great, I'll learn this magic. George instantly apparated above Larcade, lightning flashing. Super Plasma Electromagnetic Cannon, a massive pillar of lightning erupted from George's hand, striking Larcade directly from above. Having mastered the profound mysteries of lightning magic from various worlds, he unleashed its full power. Even Larcade, a member of the 12 Shields of the Holy Light, was severely injured by this single blow. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 479 1 against 10. Give it to me. Having instantly defeated Larcade, George immediately went to pat his head and search his soul. While Larcade's desire magic didn't cause direct harm, as a special spell, its effects were excellent. Used well, it could significantly weaken some powerful opponents, producing miraculous results and allowing him to easily defeat them. It was far more valuable than the Desert King's magic. If he hadn't learned the Taoist arts and golden light mantra of Dragon Tiger Mountain, he would have been in serious trouble after being hit. Indeed, not simple. All 8 of you, attack together and take him down. Seeing George finally reveal his strength and defeat Larcade in one strike, the Magic King directly ordered the 8 people except Eileen to gang up on George. Although this seemed a bit excessive, he felt it was necessary for His Majesty's orders and safety. He wasn't worried that they would actually lose to the opponent in the end, but rather that if things continued like this, and the opponent defeated several more, they might not be able to stop him from escaping. Therefore, just in case, he now ordered the 8 of them to work together to take down the strongest cat, while he and Eileen held the line. On the one hand, if the 8 of them were no match, the 2 of them could join in, making a total of 10 people working together. On the other hand, Larcade was knocked unconscious, and the lust magic was dispelled, so they also had to prevent the others from escaping once they recovered. Upon hearing the Magic King's order, the other 8 were initially stunned, but they didn't disobey and surrounded George. The Golden Cat's strength had indeed exceeded their expectations, but they didn't think it necessary for all 8 of them to work together. They all felt they could take it down on their own. However, since the Magic King had personally given the order, they had to obey. Among the 12 Shields of the Holy Light, Magic King August and Scarlet Despair Irene were elders who had served His Majesty since they were infants. They were also the most powerful mages under His Majesty, known as the Twin Pillars of the Empire, stronger than all 8 of them combined. Irene usually didn't interfere, August was their superior. Alright, then let's play a bit. After copying Larcade's memories, seeing that all 8 of them were attacking him together, with 2 others putting pressure on him, George wasn't surprised. He stretched and began to take things seriously. He wanted to see if he, in his non-dragon cat form, could handle these 10 people by fusing magic from so many worlds. It was also a test of his current strength as a single clone. Ice condensation. The first to attack was Imbulura, known as the Winter General. My ice can even freeze magic. Sleep forever. Extreme cold appeared directly on George's body, freezing him. Although both were ice magic, the Winter General's ice magic was far more powerful than Gray's, giving the impression of freezing time and space. George even felt that if he were to operate at this moment, he might be affected. Since you use ice, I'll use fire. Golden light surged from George's body, forcibly pushing aside the freezing energy, and then he opened his mouth. Dragon Slayer magic, tricolor flames, flames composed of dragon fire, fiery blaze, and demonic fire erupted, forcefully shattering the freezing energy with the power of the wood dragon. Shooting towards the Winter General. The Winter General's freezing energy was strong, but his flames were even stronger. What? Unexpectedly, his freezing aura was so easily broken. General Winter dared not be careless any longer and immediately unleashed his strongest defense. Ice armor. The ice armor was a battle suit he had condensed from the most powerful ice, possessing superhuman defensive and offensive capabilities. Anything touched by the armor would be frozen into pieces. How could this be? However, even such a powerful armor couldn't withstand George's full force three-colored flames for more than a few seconds before melting away. First one, seeing General Winter taken down in one go, George grinned. I'm not confident against Zareth, but taking you guys is no problem. George has really become a dragon slayer. Seeing that George was using dragon slayer magic, Natsu and the others were also surprised. They knew that George had gone to the northern continent to complete the century-long mission in order to become a dragon slayer. Little golden cat, don't be arrogant, stop time. At the same time, a woman wielding a sharp sword appeared behind George. As her magic was activated, time around them instantly froze. Within my time magic, no matter how powerful you are, you're still a lamb to the slaughter. The woman slowly placed her sword against George's neck, about to slice off his cat-like head. She was War Princess de Maria, skilled in time magic and divine reception magic. Thanks to the unique nature of her time magic, her strength consistently ranked among the top 5 of the 12 shields. Sorry, I can also use time magic. Unfortunately, just as her sword was about to touch George's neck, it suddenly stopped, unable to move. George calmly turned around. When sparring with the IRG Ariel, similar time magic had already failed to seal him, let alone now that he had mastered the fairy sphere. Go! With a flick of her finger, her metal control ability activated, and War Princess's sword flew from her hand, spinning in the air before piercing his abdomen with the force of hundreds of thousands of tons. He didn't intend to kill him, after all, he still needed the time magic in War Princess's mind. Received magic, soul of the god Cronus. Zanfei's pupils contracted as she received the soul of the god of time. Her magical power surged, and her physical body directly transformed into a god. She even managed to grab with both hands, forcefully blocking her own weapon. This is quite interesting. George's eyes lit up when he saw Zanfei in her divine form. He had studied the magic of receiving, and he knew how to receive animals, beasts, and demons, but receiving gods was a first for him. If he learned this, could he receive the embryo of the Celestials on Earth in the future? There's an opening. Just as George was distracted, an invisible figure wielding an invisible magical weapon stabbed at him. Clang! The sound of metal clashing rang out as the weapon was blocked by the golden light spell on George's body. Even I didn't notice. This invisibility magic is impressive. George's tail rapidly enlarged, and with a powerful flick, he sent the invisible figure flying, a look of surprise on his face. Just now, whether by instinct or mental power, he hadn't noticed anyone approaching. This shows that the opponent has reached a top-tier level in invisibility magic, blending seamlessly with everything. Only lacking in offensive power. Otherwise, he could have truly pierced through his body. However, given his body's regenerative abilities, even if pierced through, he would recover in the blink of an eye. Perfect. My invisibility magic is terrible. I can learn a thing or two from this guy. He also knows invisibility magic, but its effectiveness is only enough to fool ordinary people. Even someone at the level of the old Celestial Master can easily see through it. Chapter 480 The Terrifying Catzilla. Form transformation, powerful mechanical transformation. Seeing that the 3 who attacked first had all failed, the remaining 5 finally took it seriously. The mechanical alchemist, Judge Val, directly transformed into his strongest robot form. Brandish, known as the Destroyer of the Nation, used his form magic to enlarge Val to a height of 10,000 meters. Haha, crush me. The 10,000-meter tall giant robot Val stretched out its huge mechanical hand and slammed it down on George as if it were about to crush an ant. His strength ranked low among the 12 shields, but with Brandish's magic fully enhanced by the same strength, even the Empire's twin pillars had to be wary. Holy crap, is this a Gundam? George looked up at the huge mechanical hand descending from the sky, his body rapidly expanding. Not bad, I'm not smaller than you either. Giant magic activated, and George's cat-like body instantly reached a height of 10,000 meters. The scene of the two facing off suddenly had a sense of humanoid mechas fighting Godzilla. Oh no, Catzilla. Even if you can grow bigger, how can flesh withstand machinery? Seeing the little golden cat transform into a giant golden cat and block his attack with its paws, Val's expression changed. His hands transformed into pile drivers, hurtling towards George's cat face at high speed. Simultaneously, a magic circle flickered behind him, and various missiles created with alchemical magic shot out, circling behind George for a sneak attack. Faced with such an attack, George's mind raced. He directly controlled the missiles that had circled behind him, making them arc through the air, avoiding the back of his head, and striking Val directly in the face. The magical missiles were quite powerful, instantly blasting Val into a stagger, half of his face disappearing. Freeze! Before he could even react to why his missiles had deviated and try to retaliate, he found himself unable to move. Covered in metal, you're practically a walking disaster. George stood upright, his two cat paws flailing wildly. Moments later, Val had been reduced to a pile of parts scattered on the ground. At that moment, a torrent of black, toxic water, like an ocean, rushed towards the orange cat. It was the Grim Reaper, Bradman, who, seeing Val attacked, unleashed his magic spell, darkening of heaven and earth. Accompanying the poisonous black water were large areas of corrosive magical particles and black skulls. Such a wide-ranging attack, if used against a country, could likely destroy it, but it had no effect on George. It was all blocked by the golden light spell he maintained on the surface. Disappear! George opened his mouth, and a long, three-colored pillar of flame erupted, burning away all the black water and magical particles. Traces of time. Just as the black water and magical particles disappeared, George was attacked again. The attacker was none other than the War Princess, who had received the soul of the God of Time. Because George had just used his power to suppress Val, the sword suppressing the War Princess had lost its power, giving her a chance to counterattack. Time magic can be used like this. George felt that all the damage he had suffered in the battle was now being reloaded onto his body. This was a magic that used time to reverse damage. Why isn't it working? Zanfei was somewhat dumbfounded when she saw that her magic had successfully activated. George was only slightly stunned, without the usual painful screams that enemies would experience after being hit. Because the damage from before is nothing compared to me now. As if sensing Zanfei's confusion, George calmly gave the answer. The power of the time rift is actually very strong. No matter how strong you are, you can't withstand all the damage you've suffered in the past at once. But George is a special case. Because he has so many clones and is constantly breaking through and becoming stronger in various worlds, his growth rate is too extraordinary. This means that the damage that might have caused him in previous battles is now like a tickle to him. Even if it does have an effect, it will be offset by his current powerful recovery ability. Since it's receiving magic, then what's in your body now should be your soul, right? George's lips curled up. Spirit binding. Black key flew out from his cat paws, enveloping Zanfei completely, and then a soul with powerful time energy was forcibly pulled out by him. The spirit binding technique can forcibly capture various spirits, including the divine soul that Zanfei received into her body. In fact, this technique is somewhat of a natural counter to the receiving magic of this world. Whether you receive the soul of a beast, a magical beast, a demon, or a god, the spirit binding technique can capture as many as you receive. Such a powerful soul, I must subdue it. After capturing Zanfei's time god's divine soul, George's eyes lit up. The strength of this divine soul was no less than that of the terror serpent core, which he sealed in the Marvel main world. It was definitely worth subduing. With a wide open maw, he swallowed the time god's divine soul whole, and his magical power surged instantly. How could this be? Zanfei returned to normal, her face filled with terror. As a descendant of the time god, this was the strongest trump card passed down to her by her divine soul family. Even Zareth could only defeat her, not capture her divine soul. What's more, he even ate it. Corpse reappearance. Blocked. At the same time as the War Queen launched her attack, someone else also launched one. Corpse Neenhurt. His magic could see into the enemy's mind and materialize the enemies they feared most. However, he failed at the very first step of casting the spell. He couldn't break through George's mental defenses and see into George's mind. Stop with those little tricks. A true master needs absolute strength. Seeing the seven above all fail, the god Serena laughed and made his move. He simultaneously unleashed 8 Dragon Slayer spells, merging them together to bombard George. Time, space, assassination, alchemy, those were all special attacks. Once countered, their power would be greatly reduced. He believed that only pure destruction was the most powerful magic. Like him, with all 8 Dragon Slayer spells unleashed, in terms of pure magical destructive power, he was second only to the Empire's arms. 8 Dragon Scattering Splendor. This one strike could easily annihilate a nation. Trouble. Super Magic. Fairy's Radiance. Celestial Serena's magic was packed with energy, its power truly terrifying. Even in his current state, he dared not take it head-on. However, in terms of pure magical destructive power, he had an even stronger move. A dazzling light pierced the sky, shattering Serena's 8 dragon scattering blossoms in one strike, instantly inflicting severe injuries. It's about time to end this. Having dealt with Celestial Serena, seeing August and Irene raise their staffs, George preemptively unleashed his ultimate attack. Super Magic, Fairy's Law. Chapter 481. There are differences even between dragons. The laws of the super magical fairies, created by Mavis, violated the taboos of the true gods. At the cost of magic and life force, it used holy light to vanquish darkness. Anyone deemed an enemy could not evade it and could only withstand the attack head-on. Therefore, when he unleashed this move, all members of the 12 shields would be attacked. Those with a significant power difference, no matter how well they hid, would be attacked and rendered incapacitated, such as the assassin who had been hiding, preparing to launch another sneak attack. Even those strong enough to withstand the attack would suffer considerable damage unless they were significantly stronger. Not good. August and Eileen, responsible for the rearguard action, paled drastically. One immediately entered a state of possession by evil thoughts, while the other instantly transformed into a giant red dragon. In fact, when they saw George capture the War Princess's soul, they had already felt threatened and couldn't sit still. However, they hadn't expected George to be so fast and ruthless. The power of the latter two spells was increasingly difficult to deal with. It really was you. After the fairy law dissipated, George looked at August, who had coughed up blood, and Irene, who had transformed into a red dragon, with a hint of surprise on his face. He had sensed something was off about Irene the moment he entered the palace. Irene reminded him of the dragon Far Dragon Elf Syria. She was either a dragon in human form or a dragon slayer mage capable of transforming into a dragon. While examining the Desert King's memories, he learned her name was Irene Bilsirian. He was all too familiar with that name. Wasn't she the one Far Dragon had mentioned who created Dragon Slayer magic over 400 years ago? Therefore, he guessed that Irene had created Dragon Slayer magic, ultimately transforming into a dragon and living to the present day with the extraordinary lifespan of a dragon. I truly underestimated you. A cat possessing such strength and so many magical abilities. However, since His Majesty personally ordered your execution, I cannot disobey. After all, he was the one who restored me to human form, albeit only in appearance. Eileen, now in her dragon form, possessed even more terrifying magical power, and her defenses in all aspects surged. She looked at George and unleashed her strongest magic. Celestial magic, God's Star Collapse. A red magic circle appeared high in the sky, and a terrifying meteorite plummeted down, hurtling towards George. Unlike Gerald's celestial magic, Eileen used true celestial magic, genuinely using the extraterrestrial meteorite as a celestial weapon to bring it down. It's here. The strongest celestial magic, God's Star Collapse, capable of destroying the entire continent, the 12 shields, severely injured by the fairy law and protected by the Magic King's shield, gasped in shock as they watched the meteorite fall. Eileen's nickname, Scarlet Despair, stemmed from the fact that after unleashing God's Star Collapse, all that remained for her enemies was despair. Let alone a country, even an entire continent would suffer devastating damage if struck by such a massive meteorite. This is why the Spriggan 12 looked down on the eastern continent. If they were serious, Irene alone could destroy the entire continent. Magic spirit power and Fies couldn't match the speed with which Irene unleashed God's collapse. How could this be so terrifying? Netsa and the others were stunned, watching the rapidly falling meteorite. George, quick, Fairy Sphere, Mavis, the only one still conscious, shouted to George. No matter how powerful God's collapse was, if George used Fairy Sphere to protect everyone, they would be safe. No need, she's a dragon, and so am I. George smiled, transforming into his dragon form. If it were only Irene, Fairy Sphere could indeed evade God's collapse. But there was also the ever-watchful Magic King. According to the Desert King's memories, the Magic King Augustus, known as Calamity, was even stronger than Irene in her dragon form. More importantly, he is proficient in all the magic of the Western continent, and it is said that he knows more spells than Zareth. This also means that he is definitely proficient in time magic. If August suddenly deactivates the fairy sphere at the moment the meteor is about to hit the ground, then things will be troublesome. So the problem needs to be solved at its root, by destroying the meteor directly. To be honest, in this state, he is not confident that everyone can avoid being affected by the impact, but it will be different after transforming into a dragon. The Guildmaster has also become a dragon. Seeing George transform from a giant cat into a giant dragon, everyone below widened their eyes, especially Natsu and other guild members. Shatter, powerful lightning stimulated his body, and dazzling golden light floated on his body. George did not use attack magic, but directly met the meteor and slammed it with a claw. A violent force erupted, actually shattering the meteor in midair. The warm-up is over, now let's start the main course. After smashing the meteor, George landed in front of August and Irene, and said with a hint of excitement. Having not fought at full strength for a long time, he was unusually fired up. The Magic King August and Irene, the creator of Dragon Slayer magic, were still worth looking forward to for him now. Defeating them and copying their memories should yield considerable gains. Actually, before his dragon transformation, his magic power was somewhat weaker than theirs. Only after transforming did he have the confidence to defeat them together. But having just absorbed the soul of the god of time, his magic power had increased significantly, essentially making him on par with them even before his dragon transformation. Now, after his dragon transformation, all aspects had greatly improved, making victory a foregone conclusion. The only question was how long it would take. Irene, are you confident? August looked at George, whose terrifying magic power even made him uneasy, and transmitted his voice to Irene, who had already transformed into a dragon beside him. Irene shook her head. I didn't fight alone. I destroyed my god's star collapse with my bare body. He's much stronger than me after his dragon transformation. Although both were dragons, there were still differences in strength between them after their transformation. The black dragon that Akuroju had transformed into had slaughtered almost all the dragons, and she felt that the aura emanating from George was not much weaker than that of the black dragon. Then let's join forces. Speaking of which, this is the first time we've joined forces against an enemy. Upon hearing this, August unleashed all the magic power within him. For his majesty, roar of the wise dragon. Eileen spread her wings and charged to the front as a human shield, with the Magic King following closely behind to unleash his attacks. Slowing down the opponent's nerve speed, distorting space to create an extremely destructive spiral of pain, and large-scale collapse magic melting pillars of light. Before the two sides even clashed, the Magic King had already used dozens of top-tier spells. The power and effect of each spell were comparable to the ultimate moves of a typical 12 shield level mage. George's eyes shone brightly as he watched. Chapter 482 Grant Me Death. Golden Light Spell, Apparition, Super Magic, Fairy Law, Super Magic, Fairy Radiance, Super Magic, Fairy Sphere, Avada Kedavra Chain, Tricolor Flames, Sleep Well. George, his body gleaming with golden light, physically overpowered Irene, pinning her to the ground and pounding her, while simultaneously unleashing various spells and engaging in a magical clash with the Magic King. He also didn't forget to set up a 5 elements Kabbalah defensive barrier around him to prevent the aftershocks from harming the guild mages and the 12 shields whose memories he was about to copy. Within the barrier, magical energy exploded, various terrifying spells flew wildly, and dragon roars and incantations rose and fell. Outside the barrier, the guild mages and the remaining 12 shields trembled, their eyes filled with terror and disbelief. They had never witnessed such a terrifying battle. If it weren't for the barrier, if it weren't within the mirror space, the destructive power of this battle would have already shattered the entire western continent. Just then, a figure appeared before them all. Your Majesty, the 10 shields of the 12, who had been out of the fight, immediately showed expressions of joy, while Natsu and the others' faces changed drastically as they surged their magical energy. Hold him back until the Guildmaster finishes the battle. Don't let him interfere, Urza, dressed in her strongest breastplate suit, shouted solemnly. The newcomer was none other than Zareth, the dark mage who had single-handedly founded the Alvarez Empire and created countless terrifying demons and forbidden magic. Urza was worried that if Zareth entered a 3-on-1 fight, George wouldn't be able to withstand it. So she planned to combine everyone's strength to hold Zareth back first. Your Majesty, don't worry about them, we'll handle them. The 10 shields of the 12, enduring their severe injuries, also struggled to their feet. However, to the surprise of both sides, Zareth didn't make any move, but said with a hint of joy, "Don't be nervous, I won't go in to join the battle, and even if I did, it wouldn't change the outcome." Everyone believed that Zareth was the Empire's most powerful mage. Even George thought so. After all, his reputation made it hard for others not to think so. Only Zareth himself knew that, in terms of true combat strength, he wasn't much stronger than August and Irene. In fact, he wasn't particularly skilled in combat. His strength lay in researching and creating magic, and living a long life. Back then, he could single-handedly sweep across the entire Western continent and establish the Alvarez Empire because the Western continent didn't have many powerful mages at the time. Now, the boy he adopted, who looked a lot like Mavis, was no less powerful than him in terms of strength, but he only obeyed him out of respect. As for Irene, a genius enchantment mage who created Dragon Slayer magic 400 years ago, and also a dragon herself, how could she be much weaker than him? She followed him only to repay the kindness of turning him into human form, and also because she had nowhere else to go. Therefore, in his view, given George's strength within the barrier, enough to toy with August and Irene, even if he joined in, the chances of winning were extremely slim. So why was he happy? It was because he felt that with George's strength, and the various methods and magic he had never seen before, there might be a chance to kill him and free him. He anticipated that even if Natsu's potential was fully developed, it wouldn't surpass the strength George had currently displayed. "Father, it seems I can't protect you anymore." Inside the barrier, Irene was pinned under George's dragon claws, on the verge of death. August's evil state was also nearing its end. His magic power was dwindling, and defeat was practically inevitable. Therefore, he decided to unleash his final move, a massive ancient spell released at the cost of his own life, to perish together with George. Alusmachi, however, just as his spell was about to activate, his father's voice rang in his ears. "August, stop." In that moment of hesitation, George's spell struck him, freezing him in place. Soul-stealing, ignoring Zareth's appearance outside and his failure to join the battle, and his attempts to stop the Magic King, George, with Irene in one hand and August in the other, began to read and copy memories. The spell August was about to unleash had sent a shiver down his spine, indicating that its power could severely injure him if released. How could he possibly miss such a spell? These two, after the soul search, George silently removed the dragon claw that was stepping on Irene, released August, and casually cast 2 healing spells to prevent them from dying from their injuries. The abundance of high-quality magic in their minds wasn't unexpected. What surprised him was their identities. Besides being members of the Spriggan 12 and the Twin Pillars of the Empire, August and Irene also had a deep connection to the Fairy Tale Guild. First, August, he was actually the son of Zareth and Mavis. However, Mavis had only recently become pregnant when she died, so neither of them knew they had a son. He was eventually discovered by the second guild master who resurrected Mavis, delivered the baby, and then abandoned. As for Irene, this over 400-year-old dragon slayer mage had an even more bizarre background. She was the queen of the kingdom of Dragunov 400 years ago. To resist the invasion of the evil dragon race, she created enchanting magic, using it to imbue people with the power of dragons to form a new kind of magic, dragon slayer magic. However, she later began to transform into a dragon due to the side effects of the dragon slayer magic, incurring the hatred of her husband who hated dragons. Her husband, family, friends, and the people she risked her life to protect all abandoned her because of her dragonification, believing her to be a dragon spy, and imprisoned and tortured her for 3 years. At that time, she was already pregnant. Later, she fully transformed into a dragon and fled into the deep mountains. Unable to bear the transformation, she suffered a mental breakdown and remained in the mountains for hundreds of years until she met Zareth. Zareth helped her regain her human form, but her essence remained that of a dragon. She lost her sense of taste and could never sleep. At this time, her child was born, Urza. To become human again, she wanted to attach her soul to Urza, but maternal instincts restored her sanity. Fearing she would lose her mind again, she abandoned Urza and went to live in the Western continent. Therefore, one is the son of the first guild master, and the other is Urza's mother. Both are relatives of important members of the guild. Zareth. So you want a fair one-on-one duel with me? George removed the barrier and turned to look at Zareth. Zareth shook his head. No, I want you to grant me death. Chapter 483. I have a suggestion. Well, actually, I think living is better than dying. I don't know if you've ever heard the saying, it's better to live a miserable life than to die a good death. George paused for a moment, then blinked and replied, reverting to his cat form. He could understand Zeraf's feelings and was willing to send him to his death after draining his magic, thus eliminating another problem. After all, he had no feelings for Zeraf, he just wanted the magic in his mind. But now it wouldn't work. First, he might not be able to do it. The curse personally placed by the god of life and death in this world was definitely not easy to break. Even the black dragon, who could nullify any magic, couldn't nullify the curse on Zeraf and kill him, thus freeing Zeraf. How did he know this? He could guess. Zeraf was determined to die and couldn't defeat the black dragon. If the black dragon could free him, he would simply challenge it to a duel. Not doing so meant that the black dragon couldn't kill him either, but it could defeat and torment him. Second, and most importantly, even if he could do it, he wouldn't. Zeraf had broken a taboo and was being punished. He lifted the curse, which meant he was going against the god Angsarum. Could he expect a good outcome? Unless his strength rivaled Angsaram's, or he had some benefit he felt justified in offending the god. Mavis died because Zeraf killed her, it was the same curse, so there were no problems. You don't understand my pain, you don't understand my feelings. Kill me, or you'll become my enemy. I'll still find a way to attack the eastern continent and obtain the fairy heart. You are powerful, even comparable to the black dragon, but if I want to leave, you can't stop me. Zeraf shook his head and spoke again. George was powerful, but he couldn't defeat him, he could escape. If he couldn't be killed, he would have to continue with the second plan, fuse with the fairy heart and rewrite history. Zeraf, if you really want it, I can do it. I really can, I'm not lying to you. Mavis flew over and grabbed Zeraf's hand. Do you know why I was killed? Because your love for me surpassed my love for you, so the curse on you was stronger than the one on me, which killed me. But if my love for you surpassed yours, then theoretically, you would have been killed by the curse on me. Was it because of my love? Zeraf looked at Mavis, his eyes glazed. But you're dead. You're just a soul now, unable to unleash the curse. No, my body isn't completely dead. If I want, I can return to my body and come back to life. Mavis's eyes were resolute. So stop your plans, stop the war. I will help you end your suffering and free you. If what you say is true, then looking at Mavis before him, Zeraf's heartstrings twitched again. The frozen love could no longer be suppressed, causing the curse within him to erupt once more. Death energy burst forth from Zeraf's body, seemingly wanting to devour all life around him. This is the curse. Seeing the death energy approaching, George instantly transformed into a dragon, shielding everyone behind him. The death energy eroded his massive body, taking away a portion of his life force before gradually dissipating. This feeling is somewhat similar to the killing curse. It's undefendable, you can only withstand it. After blocking the curse, George reverted to his cat form, thinking to himself. The previous wave of curse was mainly Zeraf's attack on Mavis's love. So he only experienced the aftershocks, and its power wasn't too great. An ordinary S-ranked mage probably couldn't withstand it, but for his physical body, it wasn't a problem. Alright, I promise you, as long as you can free me, the Alvarez Empire will never wage war. Zeraf's heart froze again, and after a moment of silence, he finally nodded. However, at this moment, George spoke. I think this method is also feasible, but not now. I have a suggestion, you can listen to it. What suggestion? Mavis turned and asked. George coughed slightly. It's like this, according to you, the deeper the love, the greater the curse's power. But you haven't seen each other for over 100 years. How can you guarantee there's enough love to unleash the curse now? If the love isn't deep enough to kill the other, then it won't work. Hearing George's words, Zeraf and Mavis were stunned. How could they judge the depth of their love? So what I mean is, you can live together for a while, and once you're completely certain, then begin your plan. You've waited so many years, what's a few more? Chairman Mavis is currently in a spirit state, so she's not afraid of your curse erupting, and you don't need to suppress your feelings to prevent it from erupting. Besides, you should discuss this with your own child, don't you think? August. George turned to look at the Magic King, who had regained some strength. Besides what he had just said, there was an even more important reason why he was stopping Zeraf and Mavis from carrying out their plan now. Zeraf and Mavis are among the world's top mages, true geniuses with a profound understanding and research of magic. While the Black Dragon is powerful, his strength is limited, he's not as skilled in magic as the two. Therefore, He doesn't want them to die so young. He can access Zeraph's memories, but they are just memories. To learn the magic within, he still needs to study them himself. However, if he could exchange magical insights with Zeraph and Mavis based on those memories, it would be far more valuable. Moreover, this would turn the Spriggan 12 into allies, allowing for more than just access to memories. It would also enable future magical exchanges. Finally, given his development trajectory, perhaps in a few years he could rival Angstrom, lifting their curse and saving them from death. Our child, Zeraph and Mavis looked at August, their faces filled with confusion. George stated directly, "August is indeed your child, the second guild master." He quickly recounted the truth of what happened back then, gleaned from August's memories. Mavis looked at August, her eyes filled with expectation and affection. "Is what George said true?" "It's true, my mother." August looked at Mavis, a gentle smile on his face. The moment he saw Mavis materialized by George, he wanted to call out mother, but he had held back until now. Zeraph, standing behind Mavis, froze upon hearing this, and the curse erupted once more. Chapter 484 The 10-Year Agreement. That Angstrom is really petty. George's lips twitched as he once again shielded everyone from Zeraph's curse. This curse meant nothing to some evil people, who could even gain immortality through it, but for those with kind hearts and love for the world, it was the greatest punishment. They wanted to die but couldn't, and live each day in guilt and regret. This was probably what people often said: to punish someone, killing them with a single blow was the lightest punishment, because they only felt that momentary pain. Actually, he did have some ideas about how to lift the curse. Just as Mavis's soul was materialized by him, he could use the soul extraction method of the mage apprentice world to extract Zeraph's soul and then materialize it. But it was hard to say. Because this world was not lacking in magic that could transfer souls from bodies, and if it were useful, Zeraph would have used it long ago. Perhaps this curse not only affected the body but also the soul. As for why Mavis was unharmed, it was most likely because her death itself originated from the curse, which allowed her to return to normal in her soul state. Even if he could, he wouldn't do it now. Offending Angstrom would be a huge problem. Anyway, Zeraph's curse was ineffective against Mavis now, and their living apart from the crowds didn't affect them much. And with his physical strength, even if he withstood Zeraph's curse, it wouldn't be a big issue. Zeraph's curse was more powerful the stronger the love. Theoretically, if Zeraph fell in love with a black dragon and kissed it, the dragon would probably die. But that was obviously impossible. Zeraph had a wife and children. He was a normal person in every way. As for the Magic King was powerful. At his peak, he could theoretically withstand it several times. If not, he could use his thought form to visit his parents. Of course, he still wanted to study Angstrom's curse. On one hand, he was interested in curses of this level. On the other hand, he also wanted to consider how to break free if he ever offended Angstrom and was cursed with the same curse. The first time he saw Zeraph unleash the curse, he felt it was somewhat similar to the killing curse. So, if we're talking about breaking the spell, perhaps the love magic within the Department of Mysteries at the Ministry of Magic in the Harry Potter world has a chance of being broken. It seems his Harry Potter clone can't continue playing house anymore. He needs to master that mysterious love magic as soon as possible. 10 years, Zeraph. Let's make a 10-year pact. You and President Mavis will live together for 10 years. If, after 10 years, President Mavis's love can't kill you, then I have a way to help you find release. After Zeraph and his family recognized each other, George stepped forward and made another suggestion. In 10 years, he should be able to reach a level of strength comparable to Angstrom. Okay, I promise you. This time, Zeraph agreed almost without hesitation. He didn't even question what method George might have to help him find release after 10 years. Because his mindset had changed somewhat. The most important people in his life, his brother Natsu, his wife Mavis, and the Wizarding King, whose biological child he only now knew about, were all by his side. At this moment, he didn't want to find release as much. Besides, 10 years was just a blink of an eye for him. It wouldn't be too late to make a decision after 10 years. The remaining 12 shields breathed a sigh of relief upon hearing Zeraph's answer. They didn't want their leader to die, it was their faith. Now that things are cleared up, we're all friends. Come, let me heal you. Having resolved Zeraph's situation, George smiled and walked towards the heavily injured 12 shields. Looking at the smiling George, the 12 shields couldn't help but tremble for some reason. Healing was definitely necessary, but copying memories couldn't be delayed. The magic of these 12 shields was still somewhat useful to him. While healing Irene, he noticed that Irene's gaze frequently drifted towards Urza, her expression extremely complex. She must have realized that Urza was her daughter. George didn't expose this. The matter between mother and daughter needed to be resolved by themselves. Whether Urza could forgive Irene depended on Urza herself. Although he was the guild master, he wouldn't force Urza's decisions upon her. Irene's abandonment of Urza is understandable, but undeniably, abandonment is abandonment. If Urza hadn't been lucky, she might have died in the Tower of Paradise long ago. This is different from the Magic King, who was abandoned by the second guild master. Zareth and Mavis were unaware they had a child. That's why he revealed it, giving them a happy ending, and also to get Zareth to agree to his conditions. As for Irene, if Urza chooses to forgive him after learning the whole story, then out of respect for Urza, he will try to help Irene return to human form. Compared to Zareth, Irene's situation is much easier to handle. Zareth is affected by the curse of Anxarum, and helping him might offend Anxarum. Irene is affected by the side effects of Dragon Slayer magic. Whether using a modified animagus, extracting Irene's soul to regenerate a new body, or transferring her soul to a new body, these methods should all be effective. After healing the 12 shields' injuries and leaving the mirror dimension, George and his guildmates attended a banquet prepared for them by the Empire. During this time, he found Zareth and asked a question. Zareth, in your opinion, what are my chances of winning if I fight the Black Dragon? You won't win. Zareth shook his head upon hearing this. To be honest, your strength is no less than Acnologia's, but your magic is unlikely to have much effect on him. So, George immediately understood. It was the same problem. The Black Dragon was immune to magic, so to fight the Black Dragon, he could only use physical attacks or magic that could cause physical damage. For example, giant magic that enhances oneself, or celestial magic like Irene's that can summon meteors to bombard him. Or emotional magic like Larcade's, which is also effective, but it doesn't have any direct killing power. However, at least through Zareth, he knew that the Black Dragon's output was probably on par with his own, not higher. If they really fought, he indeed couldn't kill the Black Dragon right now, but the Black Dragon couldn't kill him either. The only troublesome thing was that if the Black Dragon attacked a certain place, it would be difficult for him to stop it. Actually, if it weren't for his desire to use the Black Dragon's body to see if he could refine a dragon crystal that could cast devouring magic, he really wouldn't want to provoke the Black Dragon. Chapter 485 George, the world's most famous football star. Normally, killing a dragon of a certain attribute and refining its body into dragon crystal allows one to acquire the corresponding dragon-slaying magic. The Black Dragon's attribute is devouring. It can absorb all magic and convert it back into magical energy, thus nullifying any magical attack, making it a world-ending dragon. If he could kill the Black Dragon and refine its dragon crystal, he could also nullify all magical attacks against him. This would be a perfect counter to all mages, even those stronger than him, as long as their physical bodies weren't as strong, would be no match for him. Or, once his New World clone obtains the key source flow, he might have a chance to achieve a similar effect. The next day, George, along with the guild members and Zareth, left the western continent for the guild's sacred ground, Sirius Island. Zareth and Mavis would live on Sirius Island, where he would also digest the various magical techniques he had acquired during his trip to the western continent. Of course, he would also engage in magical exchanges with Zareth and Mavis. He was particularly interested in Zareth's black magic, which allowed him to create powerful demons. Regarding the creation of life, he only gained some basic knowledge after communicating with Ariel Hierarchy, but he couldn't yet create an intelligent magical life form independently. If he wanted to create his own world in the future, the creation of life would be indispensable. At the same time, in the Harry Potter world. This way, using the shrinking charm inside the car will make its exterior as thin as paper, allowing it to pass through very narrow gaps while maintaining its interior space. In the Burrow's garage, George was discussing alchemy with Weasley. Arthur's alchemy was quite good. He would visit the Wheel Eyes after get off work whenever he had free time to exchange alchemical ideas. Dad, George, dinner's ready. A head with long, fiery red hair appeared at the garage door. It was Ginny Weasley. Immediately after her, a second head popped up. Long time no see, George. Long time no see, Hermione. George wasn't surprised to see Hermione. He smiled and waved. Hermione had previously written to him saying she would come to the Wheeleyes house today and then go with him to the quadrennial Quidditch World Cup tomorrow. As for Harry, he had moved out of his aunt's house and was living with Sirius Black at Black's old house. He would go with Sirius tomorrow. With Azkaban bombed and all the Death Eaters having escaped, even though Voldemort hadn't been resurrected, he already had a large number of loyal followers. Therefore, Harry was no longer safe at his aunt's house. Lily's bloodline protection spell only worked against Voldemort, not against his Death Eaters. Before, when Voldemort was a wandering ghost, Harry was safest at his aunt's house. Now, Voldemort could easily send a few Death Eaters to snatch Harry directly from his aunt's house. Sirius Black's old house, on the other hand, was much safer, as Dumbledore had personally cast the faithful charm on it, and it was also guarded by the first-rate wizard Sirius Black. Hermione, your hair and teeth. On the way from the garage to the burrow, George looked at Hermione's smooth hair and the disappearance of her front teeth with a surprised expression. Hermione's features were actually quite good, but because of her previously thick, fluffy natural curls and prominent front teeth, they didn't stand out much. She mainly focused on her studies and didn't care about her appearance, nor did she spend time dressing up like other girls. But now, with her hair smooth, her front teeth back to normal, and with her eyebrows done, light lipstick, and some makeup, she looked completely different. While she wouldn't be considered a stunning beauty overnight, she was definitely the kind of girl who looked pretty at first glance. It was mainly the contrast that mattered. If Hermione had always dressed up, even with the changes in her hair and front teeth, she wouldn't have looked particularly amazing. Before the holidays, Hermione was the image of a typical top student, a true academic at Shiver, while now she was more like the school's most beautiful girl. This contrast was quite striking. To be honest, even Hermione now isn't as pretty as Ginny, who's been a beautiful little girl since childhood. He'd heard that wizards from her own grade and even the first-year students were pursuing her right after the start of the school year. But in terms of beauty, he hadn't seen a woman more beautiful than Lothian in any world. So Ginny's beauty was just normal in his eyes, nothing particularly striking. However, Hermione's unexpected appearance today did surprise him. Of course, he only admired her and didn't have any particular thoughts. Although Hermione was less than a month away from 15, and because Western women mature early, her body looked very close to an adult, he still saw her as a child. He didn't have any special feelings for Hermione, and even less for Ginny, who was only 12. Maybe in 7 or 8 years, when they were all grown up and mature, there would be a slight chance. I used a hair smoothing potion on my hair, and I shrunk my teeth with a shrinking charm, Hermione replied casually, then immediately changed the subject. George, are you coming with us tomorrow? I'm not as busy as Percy, I only participate in competitions occasionally, so it'll be good for me to come with you guys. George didn't delve into it further and nodded with a smile. Worried that he'd draw too much attention, Umbridge basically didn't assign him any work. So he was quite free at the Ministry of Magic every day, mostly spending his time exchanging magical ideas with truly skilled wizards in various departments. Occasionally, he'd fulfill his obligation by cooperating with the English team in the preliminary rounds of the Quidditch World Cup qualifiers. And needless to say, they naturally advanced all the way to the finals. In these matches, he didn't catch the golden snitch as soon as it appeared, because that would spoil the experience for his teammates. So, he usually only caught the golden snitch to end the match when his teammates were far behind and had virtually no hope of winning. And this effect was even better than catching the golden snitch immediately upon entering the game. A comeback from adversity is always more captivating than a sudden, overwhelming victory. He first gained fame in the British wizarding world because of the Sirius Black and Pettigrew incident, and now, thanks to this World Quidditch Championship, he's known to wizards worldwide. The youngest seeker in history, the team savior who turns the tide in every match, and currently the world's most famous Quidditch player, George. From the elderly to children, half the wizarding world is now his fan. If he wins the championship tomorrow, his fan base will likely grow even more. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 486: A New Plan to Change the World. As evening fell and everyone was asleep, George silently vanished from his bed. Direction Manifestation, Tom Riddle, high above the burrow, George cast his most common tracking spell, but it didn't work as usual. Looks like he used an anti-tracking spell. Since the bombing of Azkaban, the Ministry of Magic hadn't stopped tracking the missing Death Eaters, so Voldemort and the Death Eaters must have cast anti-tracking spells on themselves. No problem, I have other world-finding spells. With a wave of his hand, a circular magic circle composed of 4 colored papers, blue, white, red, and black, appeared beneath his feet and quickly expanded outwards. The 4 elements of the Puritan magic. This was a Puritan spell specifically used for finding people. A normal wizard could find someone within a radius of several kilometers using it. With his current power, its maximum coverage could extend to the entirety of England. As long as Voldemort and the Death Eaters were still in England, he could find them. They're there. Well, that's the safest place to hide right now. In a flash, he reappeared above a large manor. This manor belonged to the Malfoy family, the oldest and wealthiest family in the wizarding world. Stealthily infiltrating the manor, he quickly found Voldemort. Looks like he's already resurrected ahead of schedule. In the original story, Voldemort hadn't resurrected at this point because he was obsessed with obtaining Harry's blood. Only by merging with Harry's blood could he break the curse on Harry after his resurrection. Otherwise, even if he were resurrected, he wouldn't be able to harm Harry, which he couldn't accept. It was because of Harry that he suffered a crushing defeat at his peak, the fearsome Dark Lord dying at the hands of an infant. This was an utter disgrace to him. But now, the situation was different. The Horcruxes were disappearing one after another, and with each failure, Voldemort felt that Dumbledore had discovered him. If he didn't resurrect soon, he might be found and eliminated by Dumbledore before even obtaining Harry's blood. So, with the help of his pet Agony, he controlled a Muggle to collect the materials needed for his resurrection, thus completing his resurrection ahead of schedule. After his resurrection, he directly turned the Dementors against him, rescued all the Death Eaters, and contacted those who had been opportunists in the past, secretly rebuilding his power. Master, Harry Potter will definitely be at the Quidditch match tomorrow. Should we capture him then? The long table in the hall was filled with Death Eaters, with Lucius Malfoy at the far left on the left. Voldemort turned to look at the shifty-eyed Lucius. No, not yet. Wizards from all over the world are heading this way. Those meddlesome guys from the Ministry of Magic are all out there, standing guard, watching for any unusual activity, and repeatedly checking everyone's identity. So we have to wait until the match is over and they relax before we make our move. The child of prophecy must be killed. Since he can't do it himself, he'll have his men do it, but not now. I heard the Triwizard Tournament has restarted this year. Very well, you'll be my first task in killing Harry Potter. Voldemort stood up, then walked to a seat next to Lucius, giving Draco a terrifying smile as he trembled slightly. Draco's mother, Narcissa, quickly said, "Great Dark Lord, he's still too young. I'm afraid he can't handle such an important task. Killing Harry Potter at Hogwarts, even if successful, would mean certain death." Lucius also froze, wanting to decline the task on his son's behalf, but Voldemort interrupted him. "Not too young. When I was his age, I had already killed several wizards and muggles." Voldemort patted Draco's shoulder. "If you can't do it, it means you have no value to me. Your father should have told you what happens to Death Eaters who have no value." He didn't actually expect Draco to kill Harry Potter under Dumbledore's protection. He was just giving Lucius a warning. He knew Lucius wasn't entirely loyal to him, but Lucius's current status in the wizarding world meant he could do many things for him. So he needed to give him a good talking to. I will definitely complete the mission." Draco felt Voldemort's murderous intent and almost wet himself. He was initially excited to learn he had become a Death Eater, but reality had taught him that being a Death Eater wasn't easy. Killing Harry, he hated Harry. Even with George around, he still didn't like Harry, but killing Harry? He really couldn't do it. But now he felt that if he dared to say no, he would probably die immediately, and even his father and mother couldn't save him. "Don't worry, even if you fail, Dumbledore won't kill you. He'll just lock you up in Azkaban. I'll send someone to rescue you." Seeing that he had given him enough of a talking to, Voldemort sat back down and continued, "Our main target now is the Ministry of Magic. Within a year, I want the Ministry of Magic to be under my control. After that, a year? That's too slow." George shook his head as he listened to Voldemort's plan. Originally, he planned to wait for Voldemort to cause trouble, then eliminate him, thereby rising through the ranks of the Ministry of Magic and gaining control. However, judging from Voldemort's current state, It would probably be a year before he started causing trouble, which was too slow for him. So, after careful consideration, he came up with a new plan. This plan would allow him to quickly seize control of the British Ministry of Magic, and even the entire wizarding world, rewriting the current relationship between wizards and muggles and ushering in a new chapter for the world. Of course, his plan might be somewhat radical, but that didn't matter. He could handle it with his current strength. The first step of this plan was to kill Voldemort. So, after the meeting ended and all the Death Eaters dispersed, leaving only Voldemort and his pet Agony, George slowly appeared. "Good evening, Voldemort. Who are you?" Voldemort, who was feeding Agony milk, wasn't particularly flustered when he saw George suddenly appear. He was just somewhat surprised. Apart from Dumbledore, no wizard in the world was more powerful than him. He was just surprised that this young wizard's invisibility spell was so good that even he hadn't noticed him. "I know you, George, that little wizard who graduated early. Since you've shown yourself like this, what, are you planning to join us?" He'd been reading the Daily Prophet lately, seen the reports about George, and heard about him from Pettigrew. If the boy wasn't planning to join them, he should have reported to the Ministry of Magic immediately after accidentally discovering his resurrection and eavesdropping on the meeting. He couldn't possibly be so arrogant as to think he could arrest them all by himself. According to Pettigrew, although the boy was young, his strength and intelligence far surpassed that of a normal wizard. So he guessed that the boy probably came to visit Draco, accidentally stumbled upon him, and was captivated by his charm, hence showing himself to join them. After all, he was a Slytherin wizard, and an orphan at that. Chapter 487 The Killing Curse 40 Penetration Version. December 12, 2024 Author, Guaqianchuan Chapter 487 Killing Curse 4.0 Penetrating Version. Second update, joining you, well, not quite accurate, to be precise is to lead you. George stroked his chin and said with a smile, "I plan to kill you now, then become your appearance, and use your identity to rule all the Death Eaters for my own use." That's right, this is his latest plan. Kill Voldemort, copy all of Voldemort's memories, create a thought form to play Voldemort, and personally rule all the Death Eaters. Through his thought form playing Voldemort, he will cause trouble, help him eliminate dissidents, and quickly gain a lot of reputation and merit. As long as the cooperation is good, then his main body can quickly become the savior and leader of the wizarding world, thus controlling the entire wizarding world. He can even break the balance between wizards and muggles and establish a true new order. The magic in the Harry Potter world still has a lot of potential to be explored, but if it continues to develop normally, then the upper limit is just that. Because the number of wizards is limited, and many are struggling to make a living, very few can truly focus their minds on magical research. To fully explore the magic of this world, it's necessary to increase the wizarding population, making them understand that magic is the primary productive force, and encouraging them to increase their research into magic to create a better life. However, even if he becomes Minister of Magic or the leader of the entire wizarding world, encouraging wizards to have more children, it's uncertain how many years it would take to achieve his desired effect. Therefore, he believes it's necessary to completely eliminate the barriers between wizards and muggles, then encourage large-scale intermarriage between wizards and muggles, greatly increasing the number of children with wizarding blood. Simultaneously, science and magic can be combined, complementing each other's strengths to create more and more practical magic. To achieve this, it's not just about unifying the wizarding world, but also unifying the muggle world, establishing a unified government with himself as its leader. But this is no easy task. Even if he could crush them with force, it would likely be extremely time-consuming, and he would also have to consider the feelings of his friends in this world. Knowing that he forcibly ruled the wizarding and muggle worlds, many would oppose him, ultimately making him a villain. This is where Voldemort, or rather, the Voldemort impersonated by his mind, comes in. Let Voldemort do all the bad things. He's the world-saving hero, leading everyone in the fight against Voldemort while simultaneously unifying the world. Kill me? Are you kidding me? Voldemort was so enraged by George's words that he laughed. Who was he? He was the Dark Lord, whose name countless wizards dared not utter. Even newly resurrected and not yet at his peak, only Dumbledore could rival him in the entire wizarding world. A mere 12-year-old wizard, relying on a few talents, dared to boast of killing him and taking his place as ruler of the Death Eaters. It was utterly ridiculous. You think you're so great just because you defeated Pettigrew and Sirius? Don't you know that I killed James Potter, who is even stronger than them, with just one spell? They wouldn't even be able to fight back against me, Voldemort sneered, drawing his wand and pointing it at George. Avada Kedavra, the speed at which he drew his wand and cast the spell was almost instantaneous, and the killing curse he unleashed was the strongest George had ever seen in the wizarding world. That intense killing intent would have killed an ordinary wizard without even the courage to draw their wand to retaliate or dodge. Unfortunately for him, his target was George. George watched the killing curse approach without dodging. With his current body and soul, even Voldemort's killing curse wouldn't cause him much harm. He could withstand Ank'Saram's curse, so why couldn't he withstand Voldemort's killing curse? His strength had long surpassed that of the world's strongest wizard by several levels. They were not even in the same league. Is that all you've got? Wormtail thinks too highly of you. Seeing George unable to dodge or use any other magic to defend himself under the pressure of his killing intent, only able to stand there dumbfounded as his killing curse struck, Voldemort's eyes flashed with disdain. However, the next second, he was completely dumbfounded, his face showing an expression of disbelief. This is impossible, because George, who had been precisely struck by his killing curse, hadn't died. He simply patted the spot where the curse had hit him and gave him a contemptuous look. That look seemed to say, "Is that all you've got? You must know, with the level of his killing curse, even if he himself were hit, his physical body would collapse on the spot. He died because he attacked Harry Potter with the killing curse, only to have it reflected back by Harry Potter's love magic, striking him instead. Yet George had taken the curse head-on without a scratch. Even a dragon wouldn't be so easily hit by his killing curse. Avada Kedavra, he cried, about to try again. But this time, before his spell could even form, George's spell struck, also a killing curse. If he continued, even if his killing curse landed, he would be hit first by George's. He couldn't believe someone was more skilled with the killing curse than him. So, at that moment, he abandoned the attempt and instead pointed his wand downwards, causing the marble floorboards to spring up and block his path. No one knew the killing curse's weakness better than him. How could this be? But then, he miscalculated again. When George's killing curse encountered the floating marble slabs, it actually veered off course and continued its attack. A killing curse that could curve, even he couldn't do that. But now wasn't the time to be surprised. He quickly used a transfiguration charm to transform the remaining slabs into a steel shield, combining them to completely envelop himself. This way, even if the killing curse could curve, it wouldn't hit him. Thinking that's enough? Naive, George smirked, and with a flick of his finger, the green light of the killing curse shrank from the thickness of an arm to the size of a toothpick, as if it had solidified. When the green light touched the shield, it pierced through the steel shield like cutting tofu, striking Voldemort's forehead and piercing through it as well. Killing Curse 4.0 penetrating version, you deserve it. Now he has 4 versions of the Killing Curse, the original 1.0, the Chain Lightning 2.0, the Tracking 3.0, and the Penetrating 4.0, each with its own characteristics. Besides the Killing Curse, he has also developed different versions of other spells. Voldemort's physical body was destroyed, and his soul immediately tried to escape, but how could George let him go? Soul capture. With a swift movement, he forcibly captured Voldemort's soul. Chapter 488 starting today, I'll be the Demon King. 13, 2024 Author, Guakianchuananu, having just captured Voldemort's soul, he was met with Nagini's sneak attack from behind, but he easily caught her in his hand. Come out, soul absorption activated, and he forcibly extracted the Voldemort split soul hidden within Nagini's body. Later, I'll extract the one from Harry's forehead. The 3 wrapped up together will be perfect for him to possess. There weren't many powerful souls in this world worthy of his possession. Voldemort's soul was already top tier. The strongest was probably Dumbledore. As for those magical creatures, like brainless dragons, their souls were inferior to those of ordinary wizards. Be good, from now on you're my pet. Temporarily sealing Voldemort's main soul and split soul, George released a special key from his hand, enveloping Nagini. Among the Inhumans of the New World, there has been an ancient school called Beastmasters. They primarily communicate with animals using their key, then control them to fight for them. When George was surrounded and beaten by various supernatural beings after the Luotian Grand Ceremony, one of them was from the Beastmaster School. He took the opportunity to copy the school's techniques. Now he could use them to control Nagini. Master, is everything alright here? Seemingly hearing some commotion, Pettigrew, who served Voldemort like a servant, stood timidly outside the door and asked cautiously. Nothing's wrong. Go and summon them back again. I've changed my plans. George imitated Voldemort's voice and tone, ordering Pettigrew standing outside. Pettigrew's fear of Voldemort was ingrained in his bones. He didn't dare to ask any more questions and quickly went to find Lucius to summon the Death Eaters again. After Pettigrew left, George created a thought form and used transfiguration to transform into Voldemort's appearance, while his real body apparated back to the burrow. In less than 20 minutes, the large drawing room was once again filled with Death Eaters, but their faces clearly showed confusion. George sat in Voldemort's original spot, with agony obediently curled up beside him. I've thought about it carefully and realized the previous plan wasn't good, so I've decided to show myself after the Quidditch match tomorrow, so everyone knows I'm back. Everyone fell silent upon hearing this. Just moments ago, they were saying the Quidditch World Cup was when the Ministry of Magic's checks were at their strictest, and they'd wait until after that to act, and that the past year had been mainly about slowly eroding the Ministry's power. Now, why was they going to openly appear? This completely overturned all the previous plans, and it was incredibly unwise. If it weren't for the fact that he looked the same and Nagini was obediently by their side, they might have even suspected that this was Voldemort. The Quidditch World Cup attracted most of the world's wizards, from London or other countries. Even if Voldemort was incredibly powerful, he wouldn't survive being surrounded by hundreds of thousands of wizards. Besides, Dumbledore might be there too. This was practically suicide. Master, I think we should put up a dark mark, so everyone will know you've resurrected. Your public appearance is too dangerous, one of the more rational Death Eaters suggested. This isn't just dangerous for Voldemort, those involved will be in danger too. However, as soon as he finished speaking, a green light struck him, and his body instantly disintegrated and vanished. Next, who agrees? Who disagrees? George withdrew his hand, revealing a cruel smile. Frankly, every Death Eater here deserved to die, including Malfoy. Therefore, he felt no guilt whatsoever in killing them. Master is wise. The crowd trembled at the sight, then nodded like chickens pecking at rice. Since his resurrection, Voldemort had become increasingly capricious. He'd only offered a suggestion, yet he'd immediately resort to killing. In the past, even slight offense would have only resulted in a crusade discourse. He's becoming more and more charming, my Dark Lord. Of course, not everyone was terrified. Those opportunistic Death Eaters were indeed so, while those who had been tormented by Dementors for over a decade and remained loyal to Voldemort still wore expressions of adoration. Bellatrix was the most extreme among them, and the way she looked at George was practically screaming. George thought this girl probably had some kind of masochistic tendency. But that was normal. Voldemort's die-hard Death Eaters would be willing to die for Voldemort. They truly worshipped him, no different from fanatics. As for the fence-sitter Death Eaters led by Malfoy, they only followed Voldemort for their own benefit. They were only sitting here because they were tied to the worship and feared Voldemort's power. If they were to die, they would naturally be extremely unwilling. Don't worry, I'm confident in doing this. Lucius, you don't need to show yourselves tomorrow, just maintain your original appearance, don't arouse suspicion from the Ministry of Magic. I'll bring Bellatrix, Master, rest assured, we will cooperate wholeheartedly wherever needed. Lucius and the others breathed a sigh of relief upon hearing this. This way, they can act according to circumstances. If Voldemort and his men are killed on the spot, they will still be the elite in the wizarding world. Exposing their identities to save Voldemort is definitely out of the question. If Voldemort really escapes from the siege of so many wizards, it means Voldemort is even stronger than before, so they can continue to follow Voldemort to achieve their great cause. You don't need to cooperate. What you need to do is to do as much publicity as possible afterward to get more wizards to join us. George stood up and walked behind Lucius, mimicking Voldemort's posture. Do a good job, and I won't treat you unfairly. Your son will go to school normally, and you don't need to kill Harry Potter anymore. He's no longer important to me. Why make a public appearance at the Quidditch World Cup? Of course, it's to involve as many wizards as possible in his upcoming plans. Although Voldemort is the Dark Lord, he is only influential in Britain, not comparable to Grindelwald, who influenced wizards all over the world at that time. This Quidditch World Cup is being held in Britain, and according to the Ministry of Magic, more than 100,000 wizards will participate. 10,000 wizards, and all wizards in the world combined, number only a few 100,000. After accounting for the old, weak, and disabled, that's about all who can truly impact the wizarding world. Therefore, If things go well tomorrow, his plan will progress significantly. If all goes smoothly, he'll become the new Minister of Magic within a month, the global leader of wizarding communities within a year, and rule the world within 3 years. That means by the time Hermione and her friends graduate, he might already be ruling over all wizards and muggles in the world. Chapter 489 Excellent people are excellent wherever they are. December 13, 2024 Author, Guaqianchuan. While controlling his thought form to impersonate Voldemort for a meeting, his real body apparated to number 12 Grimwald Place. Dumbledore's faithful charm is no match for me. He closed his eyes, sensed the situation, and quickly vanished, teleporting into the room. All magic has its limits. Even rule-based magic cannot unleash its full power against enemies far superior to oneself. George's current strength far surpasses Dumbledore's, so even if Dumbledore casts the faithful charm, he can easily break it. Moreover, he himself is proficient in this spell. However, this is only true when the level difference is too great. If the levels are similar, similar spells cannot be broken. Therefore, on Sirius Island in the fairy tale world, he set up a massive faithful charm protection. This way, even if the black dragon flies over the island, it cannot detect them. Come out, you last fragment of the soul. Entering the room and finding Harry still fast asleep, George pulled on the lightning bolt scar on his head, extracting the last fragment of Voldemort's soul hidden in his mind. Soul consumption. Taking out Voldemort's main soul and the other fragment, George merged the 3 souls into one and consumed them using the soul consumption technique. Better than nothing. The combined power of the 3 souls didn't bring him much improvement. The difference in strength was too great, so the effect was minimal. Having consumed Voldemort's soul, George apparated back to the burrow, then lay in bed, closing his eyes to refine his plans for tomorrow. The next morning at 9 o'clock, George, Hermione, and the Weasley family sat at the dining table. The Weasley family now included not only the Weasley brothers and Ron and Ginny, but also Bill and Charlie, who had taken leave to return. Percy had been working overtime for his Ministry of Magic duties. In fact, on the day of the Quidditch World Cup, apart from the British Ministry of Magic, other national ministries of magic and wizarding shops around the world were practically empty. Besides employees taking time off to watch the Quidditch World Cup, the boss himself would also come. Only places like Gringotts, where most non-wizards work, could continue operating. It's easy to imagine the immense influence the Quidditch World Cup has on wizards, far surpassing even the Muggle Olympics. Dad, didn't you say you were going to leave at 2 a.m. to catch the Portkeys? Bill asked Arthur, putting a sandwich in his mouth, somewhat puzzled. He remembered his father saying yesterday that because his younger siblings couldn't apparate, they had to leave early to catch the Portkeys the Ministry of Magic was sending nearby. He and Charlie wouldn't have to, as they could apparate directly. That was supposed to be it, but George said he could apparate everyone together, so we wouldn't have to rush for the Portkeys, Arthur replied, eating breakfast. Bill's face showed surprise. Apparate so many people. For most wizards, apparate with just one person is already an extremely difficult feat. Apparating 2 people is something only the most elite wizards can do. Bringing more than 2 is too dangerous. I recently published a book called On the Techniques of Mass Apparition, which greatly improves the limitation of apparition with few people and enhances the experience. You can take a look when you have time, George explained with a smile. During this time, besides exchanging ideas with various departments of the Ministry of Magic, he also took the time to publish some of his improved spells. The purpose, of course, was to increase his reputation in the wizarding world, preparing him for the future appointment as Minister of Magic. However, these spellbooks had only just been released and were circulating among a small group of wizards. They hadn't yet spread widely. Bill, don't underestimate George. George's magical skills far surpass mine. Many of my colleagues in the department seek his help with magical problems they can't handle. I've read all his spellbooks, although some are still difficult to master. You and Charlie can take a look when you have time. It will definitely be very helpful, Arthur said, not holding back his praise for George. During their time working and exchanging ideas, he had long been impressed by George's terrifying magical learning ability and profound theoretical knowledge of magic. Many of his colleagues in the Ministry of Magic were equally impressed. Outside, although everyone knew of George's extraordinary abilities due to the Sirius Black and Pettigrew incident, their focus was more on George's Quidditch talent and his ability to lead the England team to victory after victory. Only his hands-on colleagues in various departments of the Ministry of Magic truly understood just how terrifying George's magical abilities were. No matter how difficult the magical problem, George could always solve it. For example, a Muggle archaeologist was killed by an artifact with an ancient curse while excavating a tomb thousands of years old. No one in the Ministry of Magic could break the ancient curse contained in the artifact. It was only through George's intervention that the problem was solved. Hearing Arthur recount George's accomplishments in the Ministry of Magic, Hermione and Ginny looked at George with even greater admiration. They hadn't expected that George, a prominent figure at school, would remain so in the Ministry of Magic. Indeed, outstanding people are outstanding wherever they are. It's all trivial, Arthur's exaggeration. George waved his hand modestly. After breakfast, with Mrs. Wells giving them many instructions, especially to the Weasley brothers, they finally set off. No need to hold me, just stand next to me, giving Hermione, Ginny, Ron, and the Weasley brothers to stand beside him. George used his mental powers to cover the 5 of them, and in a flash, he disappeared from the burrow. Nowadays, he no longer needed physical contact to operate people. A mental cover was enough, and dozens of people were no problem. In the blink of an eye, they appeared before a swamp. It's so comfortable. It feels completely different from when Dad used to take us. George, your apparatus is amazing. The Weasley brothers gave George a thumbs up as soon as they appeared. Many wizards dislike using apparatus because it feels like being squeezed out of a thin tubing, quite uncomfortable. Those being apparated feel the same way. But George hadn't experienced any discomfort when he apparated them. Actually, the improved apparition in my book won't cause any danger of splitting you up even when practicing. You can check it out yourselves when you have time. George smiled and winked at the Weasley brothers. His improved apparition in the book incorporated special magic from several worlds, eliminating many of apparition's drawbacks. For example, the crackling sounds when using it, the uncomfortable experience, and the risk of being split up if you didn't practice properly. Chapter 490 Quidditch World Cup 13, 2024 Author, Guaqianchuan. However, there was one thing he retained. It could be countered by the anti-apparition charm. George's own apparition was unaffected by the anti-apparition charm, even at Hogwarts, but the apparition in his book still had this weakness. This was something he deliberately left untouched. Otherwise, if Wizard's apparition were no longer affected by the anti-apparition charm, it wouldn't be good for the entire wizarding world. Hearing George say this, the Weasley brothers immediately understood and planned to sneak into their father's room to steal the book after the match, or buy a copy in Diagon Alley. At this moment, Arthur, Bill, and Charlie also paraded over. Mrs. Weasley was one of the few wizards who wasn't interested in Quidditch, so she didn't come. Good morning, George, Arthur. When everyone arrived, 2 figures emerged from the mist of the swamp. They were dressed as Muggles, but clearly didn't know much about Muggle fashion. Wearing floral suits and tall rubber boots, and Scottish kilts with South American capes, they were Ministry of Magic employees patrolling the perimeter of the arena. Their purpose was to guide wizards who apparated or arrived using portkeys, and to drive away Muggles who strayed into the area. Good morning, Basil, Cox. George and Weasley greeted them with a wave of their hands. Basil, in his floral suit, stepped forward, his face showing weariness and envy. It's good that you're off duty. We've been here since last night, busy until now. He then pulled out a piece of parchment and glanced at it. You're staying in the first camp, a quarter-mile ahead. The camp master there is Roberts. Thank you, Basil. George and Arthur greeted them, then led everyone towards the camp. This Quidditch World Cup had gathered 100,000 wizards from around the world. To avoid detection by the increasingly technologically advanced Muggles, the Ministry of Magic had carefully chosen a sufficiently remote location. Several months had been spent building a stadium large enough to accommodate 100,000 spectators. After traversing desolate swamps and dens, magically created fog, and climbing a gentle slope formed by a vast expanse of green grass, they finally arrived at their destination. Wow, so many people. It's spectacular, Hermione and the others couldn't help but exclaim in amazement. They had never seen so many wizards gathered together before. It was truly fascinating. Tents, densely packed with small flags of various colors, covered the entire lawn below, stretching as far as the eye could see. Outside the tents, in the open spaces, were wizards of all ages from various countries, and stalls selling all sorts of food, drinks, and household goods had sprung up due to the sheer number of people. There were also unexpected magical performances and various advertisements. It's important to understand that the Ministry of Magic organizes the Quidditch World Cup with such grandeur not just for honor, but also for galleons. Held every 4 years, the Quidditch World Cup brings together 100,000 wizards from around the world, and the profits generated by these wizards far exceed the cost of building the stadium. Putting everything else aside, the money from 100,000 tickets alone is a huge profit, not to mention the rental of the magical tents and the booth fees. Therefore, the location of the Quidditch World Cup, held every 4 years, is fiercely contested by ministers of magic from around the world. It's said that in one particularly serious incident, ministers from different countries even got into a fight at an international conference. Fortunately, everyone tacitly agreed not to use wands, but to decide the winner with their fists. Our tent is over there. George glanced around and quickly found the tent in the first section. After registering with the administrator, he led everyone into the tent, which had been enchanted with a stretch mark charm. However, as soon as he entered the tent, he saw someone. "George, you're finally here. Come with me to the stadium. The match starts in 3 hours." Ludo Bagman, seeing George appear, immediately excitedly pulled him up, ready to leave the tent and head to the stadium to join the team. His England team had reached the final, enjoying great success, and they were putting in 100% enthusiasm and effort for the final. Whether this final match could end perfectly depended on George. Without George, they couldn't possibly be a match for the Irish team that could defeat Bulgaria. So he arrived early at the Wheel-Eyes tent, waiting for George to appear. "I'll be going now, see you after the match," George said without hesitation, greeting Hermione and the others before leaving with Ludo. Hermione and the others excitedly shouted to George, "George, we'll cheer you on from the stands. You must win the championship." Emerging from the tent, he saw Harry, who had arrived with Sirius. The two greeted him and then entered the Wheel-Eyes tent. On the way to the match field, he saw many familiar faces, mostly Hogwarts students. They were there with their parents and families to watch the game. After walking for a full half hour, passing through several sections of magical tents, George finally saw the match field on a slightly elevated patch of grass. The entire field looks similar to a Muggle football stadium. The difference is that a large area beneath the ground has been hollowed out, and this hollowed out space has naturally been used as seating for the spectators. Deep underground lies the actual Quidditch arena. An arena capable of accommodating 100,000 wizards would be too conspicuous if built above ground. Even with magic, it would be difficult to conceal from Muggles. But being underground is different. The ground can be magically filled in after the match, saving time and making it less likely to be discovered. Dumbledore's here too. Upon entering the arena, George quickly spotted Dumbledore speaking with Minister of Magic Fudge, as well as Snape, Professor McGonagall, and others. This is understandable, as Azkaban was destroyed, and the Death Eaters all escaped. Even though Fudge publicly denies Voldemort's involvement, insisting it was an accident, he's still quite uneasy. Fudge is probably worried that the Death Eaters might secretly sabotage the Quidditch World Cup at such an important time, resulting in a huge loss of face. The fact that none of the Death Eaters have been caught has already led to numerous calls for Fudge's resignation as Minister of the Order of the Quidditch World Cup. If another major problem arises, resulting in the deaths of many wizards, then nothing Fudge says will matter. He could simply be dismissed. That's why Fudge specifically went to Hogwarts to invite Dumbledore and the school's professors to oversee the proceedings. Chapter 491 It's raining, the game should end. December 13, 2024 Author, Guaqianchuan. To maintain order at the Quidditch World Cup, almost all the high-ranking officials and staff of the Ministry of Magic were mobilized, some having gone without sleep for days. Along the way, he saw Amelia Bournes, Director of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, Barty Crouch, Director of the Department of International Magical Cooperation, Amy, the Deputy Director and his friend, and so on. Basically, all the high-ranking officials of the Ministry of Magic were present, including Draco Malfoy and those opportunistic Death Eaters. They're all here, good. Perfect for wiping them all out. At the same time, George's thought form, disguised as Voldemort, led the Death Eaters from his former prison to the swamp outside the playing field. "Master, shall we just charge in?" Bellatrix drew her wand, her eyes filled with excitement, not fear. George glanced around. Apart from Peter Pettigrew, the other Death Eaters had similar expressions to Bellatrix. Bellatrix's group of Death Eaters, having used dark magic to kill for so long, had their minds twisted by its influence. Later, he was imprisoned in Azkaban and tortured daily by Dementors, essentially going insane, not much worse than Voldemort after he split his Horcruxes. No, now is not the time. We'll enter when the competition begins and everyone is in the arena. Remember, you are not allowed to kill a single person without my order, or this will be your fate. With that, he pointed at Pettigrew, and a beam of green light shot towards the incredulous Pettigrew, killing him instantly. Although the group was half mad, their awe of Voldemort was ingrained. Seeing him casually kill Pettigrew, they all nodded in fear. He wanted to make an example of them. To ensure these Death Eaters obeyed him, he needed to scare them from time to time. Pettigrew, a cowardly opportunist, was perfect as a scapegoat. He had spent the entire night refining his plan, and following it should be relatively straightforward. However, the prerequisite was to restrain these half-mad Death Eaters and prevent them from going on a killing spree. At 1:30 p.m., 100,000 wizards from around the world emerged from their tents, lined up to enter the stadium, took their seats, and began to cheer. At 2 p.m., on the commentary platform, Ludo Bagman, director of magical sports, pressed his wand to his throat and cast an amplification spell. Loud voice, his voice instantly resounded throughout the stadium. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Welcome to the 422nd Quidditch World Cup. The audience erupted in enthusiastic cheers and applause. At the same time, thousands of different flags waved in the air, accompanied by a jumble of national anthems from various countries. On the giant magical blackboard suspended in the air, the last line of advertising, "Babbies and flavor beans, every bite is an adventure," was erased. Now it showed, England 0, Ireland 0. Alright, enough chit-chat, allow me to introduce the mascot of the Irish national team. At this moment, the green square on the left immediately burst into cheers, and then a huge golden-green object flew into the stadium. The golden-green object exploded in the air, transforming into beautiful fireworks of various colors, and then into a giant shamrock, an iconic symbol of Ireland. Finally, countless gold coins rained down, landing in the stands. Upon closer inspection, one could see many little bearded figures carrying baskets and scattering the coins within the shamrock. These were Ireland's famous mascots, the goblins. Although these goblin coins couldn't be used as real galleons, it didn't stop the chaotic scramble. After all, many children didn't know this and thought they were real galleons. Now, Ludo Bagman's voice boomed like a bell. Raise your wands to the air, welcome the England national team's mascots. A flock of large redbirds with long tail feathers flew into the stadium, circled it once, and then hovered in mid-air, beginning to sing. Their songs were so beautiful that all the wizards were captivated, and the scrambling for the coins ceased. These birds were called red parrot birds. Their beautiful, soothing songs were the mascots of the England national team. Each country's Quidditch team has its own mascot. Ireland's is a leprechaun, Bulgaria's is a vila, Brazil's is Culupira, Norway's is the Lake Selma, and so on. As the red songbird finished its song and left the field, the Quidditch players from both sides entered on their flying broomsticks. The Irish team wore all green jerseys, while the English team wore all red. Seeing the players enter, the atmosphere in the stadium ignited once more, with everyone chanting wildly for their favorite teams and players. George's cheers were the loudest. In response to the audience's enthusiasm, the wizard in charge of magical projection at the Ministry of Magic gave George a close-up shot. Next, please welcome our referee, the highly respected president of the International Quidditch Federation, who has flown all the way from Egypt, Hassan Mustafa, a short, thin wizard, dressed in a pure gold robe matching the stadium's colors, strode onto the field. He carried a large wooden box under one arm and his flying broomstick under the other. No playing rules. After solemnly reiterating the rules to both teams, he kicked open the large wooden crate, releasing 4 magic balls, a bright red quake, 2 black blink balls, and a tiny, winged golden snitch. The golden snitch disappeared from sight as soon as it appeared. The golden snitch was noticeably faster here than in the school games, but because it was made of metal, George always knew its location. However, he didn't immediately try to catch it to win the game, as the thought entity had just led the Death Eaters in from the outside. Troy scores again, 10-0, Ireland takes the lead. Less than 20 minutes into the game, Ireland had already secured 10 points. No wonder, in terms of actual skill, England couldn't even make the top 10, how could they possibly beat the strongest Irish team? Their advancement was entirely due to George's ability to catch the golden snitch at the last moment, and this time was no exception. It's raining. The match should end. George, who hadn't moved an inch, watched the light rain fall from the sky, then sped off on his flying broomstick towards the Golden Snitch's hiding place. Voldemort, disguised as a phantom, had already entered the arena, completing the first step of his plan. It was time to end the match and begin the second step. Chapter 492 I Have a Dream. December 15, 2024 Author, Guacianchuino, Merlin, England's George has spotted the Golden Snitch. Seeing George spot the Golden Snitch first, commentator Ludo, who was initially behind in the score, immediately became excited. Ireland's Lynch, seeing George spot the Golden Snitch, also gave chase. Both are incredibly fast. The Golden Snitch is escaping, it's circling, trying to shake them off. Ludo's voice was becoming shrill with excitement. Only 20 minutes into the match, it had already entered the climax of the normal game. At the current score, whoever caught the Golden Snitch first would win the championship. Therefore, the 100,000 wizards watching held their breath. They hadn't expected the match to progress so quickly and hadn't even had time to prepare. Look! George leaped off his flying broomstick. He caught Merlin's underpants. He caught them in mid-air, and even landed back on the broomstick, a masterstroke. Congratulations to George for catching the Golden Snitch. I declare England the winner. George! 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 The audience, who had been holding their breath, erupted in a deafening roar, rising from their seats, waving their flags, and clapping wildly. But then, a deafening incantation suddenly echoed across the stadium. Reappearance of bones, a beam of green light exploded in the sky, transforming into a gigantic skull. The skull was composed of countless emerald green star-like structures, and a large python emerged from its mouth like a tongue. The dark mark, seeing the empty pattern, the wizards below were immediately filled with horror. Who are they? Who are they? Under the illumination of the green skull, a black cloud composed of iron sand drifted over, upon which stood a group of wizards holding wands. The leader among them had a terrifying face and no nose. Look at what they're holding, that looks like Dumbledore, and Minister Fudge, Director Amelia, Director Crouch, the directors of the Ministry of Magic are all there. As the black cloud drew closer, the crowd was horrified to discover that these people were carrying several unconscious and bound high-ranking officials of the Ministry of Magic. Even Dumbledore, the pillar of the wizarding world, was among them. I, Voldemort, have risen from the dead. The psychic George looked at the terrified wizards below and announced with a deliberately loud laugh. Indeed, in the last 10 minutes or so of the match, he had carried out the first step of his plan, quietly taking down Dumbledore and all the high-ranking officials of the Ministry of Magic. In order to become Minister of Magic as quickly as possible and rule the British wizarding world, he had to do this. Otherwise, even if he used his illusionary form to impersonate Voldemort and cause trouble, then dealt with it and achieved a great feat, the power struggles among the higher-ups would make it impossible for him to become Minister for Magic in just a few years. It was better to simply take all the high-ranking officials of the Ministry of Magic away and imprison them. With his current connections within the Ministry, and being the only wizard capable of fighting Voldemort, things would be much easier. As for why Dumbledore was also kidnapped, firstly, Dumbledore was too clever, and he was afraid Dumbledore would discover it. Secondly, it was to highlight Voldemort's power, thus better emphasizing his importance. Voldemort, upon hearing George utter Voldemort's name, almost all the British wizards present immediately showed expressions of fear. The wizards from other countries also paled. Voldemort's main area of operation was Britain, but his name was well known in other countries as well. Like a terrorist who nearly destroyed an entire country, even if it wasn't from your own country, if he suddenly appeared before you, it would scare you half to death. Don't be afraid. The resurrected me is not the same person I once was. You see, although I captured them, I didn't harm them, I just knocked them unconscious. George pointed to the unconscious Dumbledore and the others, then leaped onto the platform where the commentator Ludo was, startling Ludo, who immediately retreated and squeezed into the crowd. He was the only director who hadn't been captured yet. My fellow wizards from all corners of the world, I am Tom Riddle, the bloodthirsty Voldemort, the terrifying Dark Lord. But those are all misunderstandings. I did all that for the sake of the entire wizarding community, not for personal desires. I have a dream. I dream that one day, we wizards will no longer need to hide, but can appear openly in every city and corner of the world. I dream that one day, even if we fall in love with muggles, we won't need to give up our wands and magic to conceal our identities. I dream that one day, Wizards will become the rulers of the world, leading its development, instead of a constantly running away like this. The Ministry of Magic is corrupt. All they think about is how to fill their own pockets with more galleons, unaware that the weapons of the Muggles outside have far exceeded our imagination. Have you forgotten the explosion of Muggle weapons in 1945, which killed hundreds of wizards living in that city? Nearly 50 years have passed, and now their weapons are only more powerful and more numerous. If we continue like this, sooner or later we will be discovered by the Muggles and die by their weapons. So, my fellow wizards, join me, Voldemort, and let us build a wizard-led world and create a better future. We wizards are the masters of this world. The booming voice echoed throughout the arena, stunning the 100,000 wizards portrayed by George as Voldemort. Crucially, some genuinely found Voldemort's words reasonable and internally agreed with him. This was quite normal. People are inherently selfish, and wizards and ordinary people are no different in this respect. When they realized Voldemort's actions were working to their advantage, they naturally sided with him. This was exactly the outcome George desired. If Voldemort's identity was merely a minor incident in Britain, he could at most become Minister of Magic after defeating Voldemort. But if Voldemort ignited a war across the entire wizarding world, or even a war between wizards and Muggles, then by quelling it all, he could legitimately unify the world. In fact, what he was doing was something another wizard had done before, the first Dark Lord, Grindelwald. If Dumbledore hadn't intervened, it almost would have succeeded. When Grindelwald did this, he had fervent followers in countries all over the world, which shows that there were still many people in the wizarding world who agreed with this view. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 493 Voldemort couldn't possibly be that powerful. December 15, 2024 Author, Guac in George's view, if the wizarding world continues to develop like this, it's only a matter of time before Muggles discover it. For so many years, the wizarding world has seen virtually no development. Compared to decades ago, at most, there have been a few more spells to make life easier. But in the Muggle world, technological development is happening at breakneck speed. The wonders of truly advanced technology are not much less than those of magic. Once Muggles discover the existence of wizards, a war between the two sides is inevitable, because their ruling class will not allow the other side to threaten their rule. It will either be wizards ruling Muggles, or Muggles ruling wizards. In the New World, for example, Muggles rule wizards. Wizards must live according to the rules set by Muggles and their numbers must be controlled to avoid posing a threat to Muggles. And at that time, it's highly likely that wizards will be no match for Muggles. In terms of destructive power, even the most powerful wizarding magic cannot compare to nuclear bombs and various high-tech weapons. In terms of cunning and intrigue, seasoned Muggles are far superior to wizards. Wizards' greatest strengths lie in their individual combat abilities and the lethality of top-tier wizards, making them highly capable of decapitation strikes to eliminate Muggle leadership. However, given the Muggle world system, eliminating one leader only leads to another taking their place. With so many countries and so many people, it's simply impossible to eliminate them all. The most crucial point is that if war breaks out between Muggles and wizards, no one on the Muggle side will aid the wizards, but many on the wizarding side will definitely help the Muggles. Wizards whose parents are Muggle-born are highly likely to betray their allies if offered sufficiently large benefits, potentially becoming leaders of the official wizarding organization after the war's victory. Furthermore, wizards like Dumbledore, for the sake of peace, might prevent wizards from assassinating Muggle leaders. If this trend continues, the wizard's chances of winning are slim. Therefore, his actions merely prematurely ignited a war between wizards and Muggles. In this era where Muggle technology isn't yet so advanced, helping the wizards win this war and establish a unified world with wizards as the primary force and Muggles as secondary forces is a viable alternative. As for why he helps wizards and not Muggles? Because his identity in this world is that of a wizard, so of course he'll help wizards. If his identity in this world were that of a Muggle, then naturally he'd help Muggles. It's a matter of perspective. In wars like this between wizards and Muggles, there's no such thing as justice or injustice, it's all just a fight for their own interests and survival. It's like a lion hunting an antelope. From the lion's perspective, if it doesn't catch the antelope, it will starve. From the antelope's perspective, If it gets caught by the lion, it will die. There's no right or wrong here. If you're a lion, help the lion. If you're an antelope, help the antelope. Understand your own position. Don't be an antelope helping a lion, or a lion pitying an antelope. Voldemort, you're talking nonsense. How many people did you kill back then, for the benefit of the entire wizarding world? Ridiculous. You only did it for yourself. You're a damn demon. Release Dumbledore and the minister, or I'll make you die again today. At this moment, an angry shout echoed throughout the arena, interrupting everyone's contemplation of Voldemort's speech. The newcomer was none other than Rufus Scrimgeour, head of the Auror office at the Ministry of Magic, followed by a large group of Aurors. They all solemnly raised their wands, aiming them at George standing on the commentary platform. George, seeing this, laughed arrogantly. You lot? Even Dumbledore isn't a match for me now. You piece of trash think you can take me on. Attack. Rufus didn't waste any words, directly ordering all the Aurors to attack George. George, however, waved his hand, releasing an ironclad charm to shield himself. A dense barrage of spells struck George's ironclad charm relentlessly, yet it didn't even create a ripple. How is this possible? Rufus and the others' expressions instantly changed. Voldemort was powerful, but it was impossible for him to block so many of their spells with a single ironclad charm. Petrify all. Chain lightning. George maintained the ironclad charm with one hand and unleashed a body-binding charm with the other, instantly petrifying half of the Aurors and freezing them in place. Seeing the situation was dire, Rufus shouted to those around him, "Please help. We can't let Voldemort get away like this, or the wizarding world will be in chaos." Hearing Rufus's cry, many wizards resolutely drew their wands and aimed them at Voldemort on the commentary stand. Among the 100,000 wizards present, many were ordinary civilians who dared not attack Voldemort for fear of retaliation. Some had even quietly retreated and fled. Many were also children, lacking any fighting ability. However, there were also many Aurors and staff from other countries' ministries of magic, such as Lena, the head of the Auror office at the French Ministry of Magic. They had all taken leave to watch the World Quidditch World Cup. Faced with this situation, they naturally had to step forward to help. Of course, there were also many who, while not members of the Ministry of Magic, were filled with a sense of justice, or who had a grudge against Voldemort and the Death Eaters. These included Sirius Black, Professor McGonagall, Professor Snape, and many others. Even the brave students like Harry, Hermione, and Ron raised their wands. Tens of thousands of spells of all kinds flew from the wand, all aimed at Voldemort standing there. The Death Eaters, who were completely loyal to Voldemort and were carrying Dumbledore in the air, paled at the sight. They knew Voldemort was powerful, but even if he was powerful, he couldn't possibly fight against tens of thousands of wizards, nor could he withstand tens of thousands of attack spells. Ha ha ha, today I'll show you just how powerful I, Voldemort, truly am. Only I can lead the wizarding world onto the truly righteous path. George used Voldemort's flight spell, soaring into the air, waving his wand, and a killing curse thicker than a thigh shot out, rapidly circling in midair. The powerful killing curse collided with the incoming spells, shattering them all. Not a single one could penetrate and hit George. This scene left everyone dumbfounded. Impossible. Voldemort couldn't be this powerful. Was he still a wizard? Even the legendary Merlin, even the four great houses that created Hogwarts, couldn't possibly withstand an attack from tens of thousands of wizards. At this moment, everyone felt that Voldemort was comparable to a god, an invincible being, and a deep fear was planted in their hearts. Just when everyone was in despair, a loud shout resounded throughout the arena. "Voldemort, stop your arrogance. Let me take you on." George tore open his Quidditch shirt, revealing a magnificent wizard's robe underneath. 8 pairs of pure white wings spread from his back, and his whole body radiated a holy light as he flew to the opposite side of Voldemort. Chapter 494 Thunder Shatters the Darkness. December 15, 2024. Author, Guaqianchuan. George wasn't particularly fond of showing off. He preferred to work quietly and develop his skills silently. But at this moment, he needed to show off enough to achieve the desired effect. As it turns out, as long as you have sufficient strength to back it up, effective showing off can indeed bring you a large following of admirers. Which of the superheroes in the main world didn't make a grand entrance, especially the flamboyant Iron Man? The Avengers superheroes even all liked the same landing style, collectively known as the superhero landing, which is why they have so many fans. And now, George's stylish and unique entrance certainly attracted everyone's attention immediately. Above the arena, on the left was Voldemort, surrounded by black mist, clearly from the evil camp. On the right was a radiant young man with 8 pairs of wings, like an angel. The stark contrast immediately gave the 100,000 wizards present a glimmer of hope. Of course, it was only a glimmer. After all, Voldemort's strength had just been too overwhelming. A mere underage wizard dares to challenge me? You're not bad, I admire your courage, but you're far too overconfident. The psychic George looked at the real George with a face full of mockery. The real George, however, retorted righteously, whether it's overconfidence or not, we'll only know after we fight. He waved his wand. Lightning, summon. A terrifying bolt of lightning, thicker than a water tank, descended from the sky, striking the psychic George squarely. The psychic George feigned a change in expression, waving his hand again to unleash the ironclad charm, capable of blocking countless aura spells. However, this time, the defensive shield formed by the ironclad charm failed to withstand the lightning attack and was shattered on the spot, though it also exhausted its energy and disappeared. At such a young age, your strength has already surpassed Dumbledore's. Leave your name, and I will spare no nameless wizards with my killing curse. The thought form of George, disguised as Voldemort, brandished his wand and roared. The green light of the killing curse, which had shattered tens of thousands of spells earlier, shot directly at George's true form. The wizards below, seeing this, felt their hearts leap into their throats. This duel, this dialogue, was 1,000 times more exciting and tense than the Quidditch match just now. George, watch out! Hermione, Harry, and other friends of George, Snape, McGonagall, and other teachers from the school, as well as his colleagues, couldn't help but shout warnings. George's true form, however, remained sullen, also waving his wand and unleashing lightning no less powerful than the green killing curse. Ministry of Magic, Assistant Director of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, George, will shatter the darkness with lightning today. The white lightning and the green killing curse met in midair, like needles clashing against wheat, instantly locked in a stalemate. The energy fluctuations caused by the clash of these two spells, far exceeding the imagination of normal wizards, distorted the very air. The entire arena trembled under the immense energy fluctuations. All the wizards in the stands were filled with horror. They had never witnessed such powerful and terrifying magic, as if it were a natural disaster. Boom! An explosion rang out. The green and white light vanished simultaneously. And the powerful shockwave blew all the wizards in the stands away, crashing into the wall behind them and rolling in heaps. Meanwhile, George's psychic form and his original self smirked and flew off to opposite sides, secretly using a transfiguration charm to turn their saliva into blood. Without darkness, there is no light, boy. You can never wake those who are pretending to be asleep. The Ministry of Magic is rotten. They are no match for me. And you are just a lowly assistant in the Ministry of Magic. Even if you are strong, so what? That's enough for today, let's go. George's psychic form deliberately emphasized lowly assistant, then, he transformed into a streak of black light and flew back to the black cloud of iron sand, disappearing with all the Death Eaters, Dumbledore, and the high-ranking officials of the Ministry of Magic. George slowly landed on the commentary platform where Voldemort had just stood, spitting out blood again. George, how are you? Rufus, McGonagall, Snape, and the others immediately surrounded him anxiously, their voices filled with concern. George took a deep breath and wiped the blood from his mouth. I'm fine, just a minor injury, but Voldemort must be in a terrible state too, otherwise he wouldn't have retreated so easily. It's a pity we couldn't save the headmaster and the minister. George, you did a great job. If it weren't for you, the Ministry of Magic might not exist today, and who knows how many people would have become his prisoners. Everyone quickly comforted him. Except for Snape, who knew a little about George's background. No one could have imagined that George possessed such formidable strength. Even the terrifying Voldemort had been forced to retreat. Now they were extremely grateful, even feeling like they had escaped a calamity, and they certainly didn't blame George for not saving Dumbledore and Fudge. The high-ranking officials of the Ministry have all been arrested. Next, we'll be facing Voldemort, who is hundreds of times more powerful than he was a decade ago. Voldemort's words have reminded me. George, you can no longer be just an assistant, you must shoulder greater responsibilities. Only your strength can fight Voldemort. You should be our new minister, leading us to stop Voldemort's plot. Seeing the remaining high-ranking officials of the Ministry of Magic, along with those from other countries' ministries of magic, approach, Rufus pondered for a moment, then looked at George with a grave expression. With all the high-ranking officials of the Ministry of Magic arrested, the public would completely lose faith in the ministry. Only by appointing George, who had just defeated Voldemort, as minister could some confidence be restored. Moreover, besides George, there was indeed no one else capable of fighting Voldemort. Furthermore, considering that cooperation with other ministries of magic would be necessary to combat Voldemort, a leader with George's strength would give the British Ministry of Magic greater influence. As for the concern that George was too young to handle ministerial duties. On one hand, based on his interactions with George over this period, he found him to be mature despite his young age, and in some ways, far superior to Fudge, who only knew how to manipulate power and couldn't accomplish anything practical. On the other hand, there were others there, they could assist George in many matters. Director, I'm just a lowly assistant. And I've only been with the Ministry of Magic for a short time. How can I become minister? Isn't that against the rules? And you know, I joined the Ministry of Magic mainly because I enjoy studying magic. George immediately feigned reluctance upon hearing this. At this point, he naturally had to maintain an act. Special times call for special treatment. I think Mr. Scrimgeour is right. We need ministers like you right now. Amy, the deputy director of the International Magical Cooperation Division, immediately stood up to support George. Chapter 495. We choose George. He is the one everyone wants. 15. 2024. Author, Gwakianchan agreed. I think there's no problem. Ludo Bagman, the only director who hadn't been caught, also sided with George. He didn't think as much as Rufus, nor was he like Amy, who was originally George's man. His thinking was simple. After the Quidditch World Cup, his power in the Department of Magical Sports would return to its previous state, and he would continue to serve as the least powerful director in the Ministry of Magic. But if George became minister, it would be different. George was, after all, a member of his England Quidditch team, who had just won the Quidditch World Cup, and he had a good relationship with him. If he became Minister of Magic, he would inevitably favor the Department of Magical Sports, and then his life would be much easier. I disagree. At this moment, Umbridge, wearing a pink sweater, squeezed out from the crowd. As George's direct superior, she was jealous of George's ability and talent, and worried that the famous George would replace her in the minister's office. She had been secretly suppressing him. If George became minister, she would definitely not have a good life, so she could not agree. Moreover, with Voldemort having captured all the high-ranking officials in the ministry, she and Rufus are the most likely candidates to succeed him as Minister of Magic, based on both seniority and authority. If George was chosen as minister, why not make herself minister? As for dealing with Voldemort, once she becomes minister, she can order George to fight him. Would he refuse? She understands people like George and Dumbledore. For the peace of the wizarding world, they would fight Voldemort to the bitter end, even at the cost of their own lives. Therefore, she has no concern that George will be lazy after she becomes minister. George's abilities are certainly not in question, but he's too young and inexperienced. Making him minister would be irresponsible. I think at such a crucial moment, the selection of minister should be more carefully considered, and should be determined through discussion and voting. As long as a minister isn't elected immediately today, she has plenty of ways to use political leverage to seize the position. Rufus is no match for her in this regard. I think Headmaster Umbridge is right. Such a significant matter as Minister of Magic naturally requires careful consideration. Malfoy, leaning on his cane, gracefully approached. George was the only wizard who could rival Voldemort, and if George became Minister of Magic, it would certainly be bad news for Voldemort. Therefore, he was determined to stop him. As one of the 28 pure-blood families, the Malfoy family wielded considerable influence in the wizarding world, especially within the Ministry of Magic. They had even orchestrated Dumbledore's near removal from his position as headmaster. So, his intervention immediately drew a following, including those opportunistic Death Eaters. George had anticipated this scenario and already had a plan. Meanwhile, Voldemort, disguised as a thought form, teleported away with everyone and then waved his hand, taking Dumbledore and the others into a spatial dimension. Having absorbed the Minerva confinement and the spatial magic system of the Eastern continent, his spatial magic was no longer limited to inanimate objects. He could now manipulate living things as well. You all go back to Malfoy Manor and wait for me. Leaving an order for Bellatrix and the other Death Eaters, he teleported back to the Quidditch pitch, blending into the crowd of wizards and using sound magic to continuously emit various different sounds. The higher-ups in the Ministry of Magic are all useless. They can't even catch a runaway Death Eater, all they care about is galleons. We can't let their leaders remain minister, or we're finished. Since that idiot Fudge isn't here, we need to choose someone more capable, younger, and wiser as minister. I think he's right. I choose George. George repelled Victoire, published many spellbooks, improved spells, and won the Quidditch World Cup. Yes, we choose George. He's the one everyone wants. George. 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 After George's chanting, the wizards present, especially the British wizards, immediately realized what was going on. Thinking about the corruption and inaction of the Ministry of Magic over the years, the unpleasant experiences they had had there, and George's impressive entrance that had repelled Voldemort, whom they dared not even call by name. The contrast was stark. Aside from a few wizards influenced by Voldemort's speech, most were chanting George's name. Wizards from other countries, many impressed by George's power and eager for a spectacle, joined in the chanting. The entire arena was filled with the sound of George's name. Umbridge, Malfoy, and the others, completely unprepared for this turn of events, dared not utter a word in response to the overwhelming cheers. See? This is the will of the people. What more is there to say? The vote is already in hand, Rufus said with a mocking expression. While he might be less adept at underhanded tactics than Umbridge and Malfoy, in this situation, no amount of underhanded methods would work. This was the will of the people, the inevitable trend. If they disagreed, the entire Ministry of Magic could be rebuilt. Everyone, I'm very grateful for your support, but I truly feel my qualifications are too shallow, and I'm worried I won't be able to do a good job as minister. George walked towards the commentary booth with a look of shame, using a megaphone charm to reassure everyone, even if I don't become minister, for the sake of the entire wizarding world, I will absolutely do everything in my power to stop Voldemort's atrocities and protect everyone. Minister, minister, minister. Various voices rang out again from all over the arena, prompting everyone to raise their arms and shout. The scene was out of control once more. George, just say yes. We'll all help you manage the Ministry of Magic well. Everyone supports you. Amy stepped forward, her expression sincere. Those pragmatic wizards from the Ministry of Magic who had previously exchanged magical insights with George and received his help also responded enthusiastically. George, looking utterly helpless, finally gritted his teeth and said, "There's a saying, with great power comes great responsibility. Since everyone supports me so much, I can't shirk my responsibility any longer. All right, I'll take over as Minister for Magic, lead everyone to defeat Voldemort, and rescue the headmaster and the others." Seeing George finally agree to take the position, cheers erupted from below. Perhaps we can win Umbridge over. The matter was already settled, and Malfoy's face showed regret, but then, seeing Umbridge's even more embarrassed expression, his eyes lit up. Umbridge was now a powerful figure in the Ministry of Magic. If they could bring him to their side, it wouldn't be a bad thing. Chapter 496 Minister of Magic George. December 16, 2024 Author, Guaquianchuan. Late at night, Malfoy Family Manor, Conference Room. Master, this is what happened. That George will soon become the new Minister of Magic, and I estimate that he will join forces with the Ministries of Magic of other countries to launch a further encirclement and suppression against us. The elder Malfoy reported all the information he knew. George nodded, patting Nagini beside him. Don't worry, this happened in Britain. As long as it hasn't affected other countries, their Ministries of Magic won't exert much effort, at most sending a few wizards to assist. The Ministries of Magic of various countries are all scattered and can't amount to much. Then what do we do next? The elder Malfoy asked cautiously. The old Voldemort was already terrifying, but the current Voldemort is even more terrifying than before, easily shattering even the combined magic of tens of thousands of wizards. If he wanted to kill him, he would have no power to resist. But there was no other way. He was already on this ship, and if Voldemort really could unify the entire wizarding world and the Muggle world, the benefits that the Malfoy family would gain would be enormous. With his abilities, he would be second only to the Lord in the future. So the risk was worth taking. Next, firstly, try to win over as many powerful figures in the Ministry of Magic as possible, like Umbridge. You should have more experience than me in how to do that. Secondly, after this incident, many wizards should be willing to join us. You should gather them all under my command. Finally, That George is indeed a minor problem, so our next focus will be on other countries. Once we have enough manpower, we will deal with them all at once. George quickly explained his plan to Malfoy and all the Death Eaters. On the surface, what he said seemed to be a genuine attempt to unify the wizarding world. In reality, what he and the Death Eaters were doing was mainly to pave the way for the future unification of the wizarding and muggle worlds by the real George. Master, brilliant. Hearing George's plan, Malfoy and all the Death Eaters nodded in agreement. They felt that although Voldemort was somewhat capricious, his mind was still sound. He was still the powerful and charismatic Dark Lord. With such a Dark Lord, great things are within reach. As for that George, he is indeed powerful, but what can such a little brat accomplish with the Ministry of Magic they've infiltrated? Besides, the enemy is in the open while we are in the shadows. The advantage is ours. At this moment, all the Death Eaters were filled with confidence. Remember, do not kill anyone in the operation without my permission, not even muggles. We were too aggressive before, causing everyone to stand against us. Now we must make a change. In addition to winning over those wizards who share our ideals, we must also ensure that those neutral wizards do not stand against us. Everything can be settled slowly after we succeed. If I find out that you have killed people at will without my orders and ruined my plans, you know what will happen to you. Finally, George added a special instruction. Master, we absolutely dare not disobey your orders. All the Death Eaters felt the suffocating aura emanating from George and immediately trembled, replying loudly. 3 days later, amidst a deluge of reports, George assumed the position of Minister for Magic, officially taking charge of the British Ministry of Magic. Upon assuming the position of Minister of Magic, he immediately promoted those who supported him. Rufus was promoted from Chief of the Auror Office to Head of the Department of Magical Law, and Tonks was promoted to Chief of the Auror Office. Amy was promoted to Head of the Department of International Magical Cooperation, while also serving as Under Secretary of State for Magic. Arthur Weasley went from being an ordinary staff member in the Office of Forbidden Magic to Head of the Department of Magical Accidents and Disasters. He also specially recruited the highly capable Remus John Lupin to serve as Head of the Department of Magical Creatures Control. Even Ludo, because he sided with him, took on the additional role of Head of the Department of Magical Transportation, in addition to his original position as Head of the Department of Magical Sports. Those wizards who had interacted with him on magical matters during this period, those with genuine ability and strength, were promoted from menial positions to truly important ones. Those wizards who had entered the Ministry of Magic through connections and networks without contributing were either dismissed or demoted. Aside from wizards like Umbridge who were deeply entrenched in the Ministry of Magic, George's sweeping reforms essentially transformed the ministry, increasing its efficiency exponentially. This impressed those wizards who had initially worried about his young age, and made ordinary wizards realize the difference in the new ministry. Keeping Umbridge and the Death Eater wizards in the ministry was naturally useful, otherwise, it would have been too easy for him to make them disappear without a trace. Meanwhile, at Hogwarts, with Headmaster Dumbledore in Voldemort's hands, a new headmaster was inevitable. George recommended his former headmaster, Snape, who became the new headmaster. Harry was very upset about this. His next few years would be even more difficult. The Triwizard Tournament, originally planned, was cancelled due to Voldemort's resurrection. What are the various ministries of magic saying? In the Ministry of Magic's conference room, George, in his capacity as minister, was convening a meeting regarding the capture of Voldemort and the Death Eaters, and the rescue of Dumbledore, Fudge, and others. Aside from the ministries of magic in France and Ireland sending large numbers of Aurors to support them, other countries are still discussing Voldemort's resurrection, Amy replied, her expression not very good. The ministries of magic in France and Ireland were able to send Aurors so quickly because they already had good relations with the British Ministry of Magic. More importantly, these countries are located near Britain, and if Voldemort were to act as he did a decade or so ago, they would also be affected. However, for the Ministry of Magic in more distant countries like the United States, while Voldemort certainly posed a great threat, he hadn't yet left Britain or harmed their interests, so they weren't in such a hurry. If the British Ministry of Magic could resolve Voldemort's situation in the meantime, that would be even better. After all, the British Ministry of Magic had the wizard George, who could fight Voldemort. As for how many British wizards would be sacrificed in the process of defeating Voldemort, that was a matter for Britain and wouldn't affect their own wizards. On the contrary, given Voldemort's performance in the Quidditch World Cup, even if they send a large number of Aurors to support him, Even if they won, many wizards would likely die. That's human nature. If it weren't for Dumbledore leading the way and gathering some friends, the various national ministries of magic, through their infighting and cooperation, would not have been able to defeat Grindelwald. Chapter 497 The Wizarding World is about to be exposed. 16. 2024 Author, Guaqianchuan. There's no need to be discouraged. This is normal. Even if they send people, it won't make much difference. Our real problem is Voldemort. So, you and the Aurors sent by various countries to support us will disperse and search for the Death Eater's locations. Don't act rashly once you find any clues. I will use this time to adjust my condition and find magic that can defeat Voldemort. George sat in the minister's seat, outlining the Ministry of Magic's next course of action. His meaning was simple: their greatest enemy was Voldemort, and Voldemort's Death Eaters were nothing compared to him. And currently, it seemed only he could defeat Voldemort. The difference in strength between the others was too great, and even a large number wouldn't help. At the Quidditch World Cup, tens of thousands of people couldn't defeat Voldemort, and even if the various national ministries of magic sent Aurors, they still wouldn't reach tens of thousands. Therefore, the most important thing now was for him to seize the time to continue improving his strength to prepare for the final battle after finding Voldemort. Amy and her team handled the minutiae of the Ministry of Magic, allowing George to focus on his research, especially the love magic that had harmed Voldemort. The current high-ranking officials at the Ministry of Magic agreed with George's assessment and supported his dedication to finding a way to defeat Voldemort. They hadn't expected the 13-year-old George to manage so many of the ministry's affairs. His decisive and efficient reorganization of the ministry far exceeded their expectations. What they valued most was George's formidable strength in confronting Voldemort and the confidence this strength instilled in everyone. After the meeting, George disregarded everything else and plunged into the Department of Mysteries. All the silent ones in the Department of Mysteries entrusted George with all their research findings, assisting him in learning forbidden magic and finding a way to defeat Voldemort. After several days of arduous work, George finally achieved his goal. In fact, with his current power, abandoning moral boundaries and extensively using the Imperious Curse and memory manipulation, he could unify the world without such a complicated process. He eliminates the disobedient and spares the obedient, using absolute power and authority to subjugate the world. After all, his strength is unmatched in this world. However, the key is that he isn't entirely without morals, especially towards friends he's known for years. While doing so would certainly save him trouble, it would leave him emotionally conflicted. It's like wanting to travel to one place, but your friend doesn't want to go. They want to go somewhere else. Would you use the Imperious Curse to force your friend to change their mind simply because of a difference of opinion? Of course not. You would spend more time subtly explaining to your friend how wonderful the place they want to go is, gradually changing their mind. His ambition to unify wizards and muggles and establish a magical empire would likely be opposed by Dumbledore, Snape, and everyone else. He couldn't simply become a villain and kill those who opposed him, or directly control them with the Imperious Curse. Therefore, he was willing to spend more time having his thought form impersonate Voldemort, completely disrupting the world, and then he would unify it in a positive light. In this way, his goal would be achieved, he would be satisfied, and everyone would be happy. It was just a waste of time. For him, this wasted time was worthwhile, since establishing a unified empire and developing magic in this world naturally required a long time to yield results. The growth of the wizarding population couldn't be accomplished overnight. And so, half a month later. So many years of research, and I'm only at the beginner level. It seems I haven't studied enough wizards. In the Department of Mysteries, George, having mastered all the research on the silent ones over the years, couldn't help but sigh. The Department of Mysteries researched 6 major categories of magic: love, brain, prophecy, death, time, and cosmos. In his view, it was only at the beginner stage, but it was still quite helpful to him. Mainly, the Ministry of Magic felt that these 6 categories of magic were too dangerous for ordinary wizards and were only suitable for a select few to study slowly. If that weren't the case, even with the current population of the wizarding world, if a large number of wizards participated in the research, they probably wouldn't still be at the initial stage, and some might not even have reached that level yet. The time is almost up. It's time to implement the second phase of the plan. This world won't yield any more gains in the short term. Any further breakthroughs will only be possible when the world is unified and the population explodes. Therefore, the second phase of the plan is, A major exposure of the wizarding world. He wants to completely expose the wizarding world to muggles, thereby ushering in a new era. And how to conduct this exposure reasonably is quite simple. Here they come. The elevator doors of the Ministry of Magic opened, and Rufus rushed into the love room of the Department of Mysteries. Minister, we've found traces of the Death Eaters. They're on Oxford Street. Yesterday, he suddenly received a magical tip-off letter stating that Umbridge of the Ministry of Magic had secretly sided with Voldemort. Today, Umbridge would be meeting Voldemort, and by secretly following Umbridge, they could find Voldemort's lair. Although he felt the tip-off letter was strange, just in case, he personally used the disillusionment charm to become invisible and follow Umbridge. And indeed, Voldemort and his Death Eaters were discovered in a basement on Oxford Street in London. Knowing he was no match for Voldemort, he immediately returned to George. Alright, gather all the Aurors and wizards sent by various countries to help. We'll move out immediately. George immediately feigned a look of delighted surprise. I've also made a breakthrough. This time, we must bring Voldemort to justice. The letter of denunciation was, of course, sent by him, and Umbridge was deliberately summoned by his thought form today. Oxford Street was chosen because it was London's most bustling street, and also the location where wizards would be exposed to the Muggle world. What followed was an epic battle that would shock the entire world and could not be concealed by magic. And the two sides in the battle were him and his thought form. The situation has been explained. We'll depart immediately. Location, Oxford Street. Objective, capture Voldemort and all Death Eaters. If they resist, kill them on the spot. After assigning tasks to everyone, Rufus nodded to George, and they simultaneously apparated away. Arriving near the basement on Oxford Street, the professional Aurors immediately began using various spells to drive away the nearby Muggles, setting up anti-apparition spells and various barriers to surround the basement layer upon layer. Chapter 498 The Giant over London. December 17, 2024 Author, Gwakianshan Great Arc Lord, from this day forward, I will be utterly loyal to you and obey your commands. In the basement beneath Oxford Street, the obese Umbridge knelt before the psychic George, flauntingly professing her loyalty. Since becoming minister, George's life had become increasingly difficult. Her power had been gradually usurped. Unexpectedly, her fortunes had turned, and she had caught Voldemort's eye. If she could help Voldemort unify the wizarding world, would she still lack power? Very good. Work well for me, and you will be Minister of Magic in the future. The psychic George looked at the kneeling Umbridge, a hint of mockery flashing in her eyes. The Ministry of Magic didn't need many people, keeping just Malfoy would suffice. This pink-skinned toad could be used today and then made to disappear. Voldemort, you're surrounded. Drop your wand and surrender immediately, or we'll execute you on the spot. The basement door was flung open, and Rufus stormed in with a large group of his most elite Aurors, all pointing their wands at the psychic George. George looked down at the horrified Umbridge. Looks like you piece of trash, gave yourself away. I don't need such useless subordinates, Dark Lord. It wasn't me. Umbridge trembled, about to explain, when a beam of green light struck her, instantly shattering her body. You think you can take me down? Having killed Umbridge, the psychic George looked at Rufus and the others with disdain. At that moment, the real George entered. They might not be able to do anything to you, but what about me? It's you again, Humph. You really think I'm afraid of you? I felt it was a bit of a waste to kill you last time. Our enemies should be Muggles, not the other side. If you're this stupid, then there's no need to keep you alive. The thought entity started putting on an act after seeing the real body. The real body was no less impressive, saying righteously, no matter what you say, you can't wash away the crimes you committed back then. Release the headmaster and the others, then there's nothing to talk about. Petrify chain lightning to the end. The thought entity George waved his hand, and blue magical rays pierced through the elite Aurors surrounding him, freezing them in place. All curses end. At this moment, the real body George also made his move, first removing the full body binding charms from all the Aurors in a wide area, and then launching an attack on the thought entity. So the two of them exchanged blows, with all kinds of powerful spells flying out. Because the power of their magic was too strong, the entire basement was quickly blasted into the air, and the two of them fought from the basement to the ground, and from the ground back into the air. Fortunately, the Aurors had cleared out the surrounding Muggles beforehand and taken protective measures, preventing the battle from being discovered by the Muggles. Rufus and the other Aurors who wanted to help realized that even with hundreds of them, they couldn't intervene in the fight. Their spells were neutralized by the aftershocks of the magical clash before they even reached Voldemort. This made them truly understand that only George could rival Voldemort. I didn't expect you to be so proficient in so much magic at such a young age, even mastering forbidden love magic. But I am not the same as I was back then. Your love magic cannot harm me. Let me show you my true power. George, in his psychic form, roared, transforming into a dragon and rapidly expanding into a colossal creature that appeared in the skies above London. Ha ha ha, hiding? We wizards have hidden enough. Today, we'll let these muggles know that wizards are the true masters of this world. He's gone mad. Rufus and the other Aurors trembled as they watched Voldemort transform into a dragon thousands of meters tall, his voice echoing throughout the city. Their voices were filled with disbelief and fury. They knew about animagus transformations, but animagus could only transform into ordinary creatures. This was the first time they'd seen someone transform into a dragon. And this dragon was enormous. All the dragons in the world combined probably wouldn't be as powerful. Even more troublesome was that Voldemort had essentially exposed wizards to the muggles, practically declaring war on them on behalf of the wizards. This wasn't 1926, but 1994. In 1926, in New York City, thanks to Grindelwald, the wizarding world was almost exposed to the muggles. Fortunately, Newt Scamander, the master of fantastic beasts, used magical creatures and a special substance extracted from their bodies to erase the memories of all muggles in New York, allowing the wizarding world to remain hidden. However, that only worked in 1926. Even if they tried to use the same method on Newt Scamander now, it would be useless. Modern muggle technology has invented the internet, mobile phones, and computers. And indeed, that's the case. At this moment, ordinary people in London were both shocked by the enormous fire dragon appearing in the sky and quickly took out their phones to film and upload the footage to their social media platforms. Within 10 minutes, everything happening over London would likely have spread throughout the world, and everyone would know that wizards and magic are real. Governments around the world would immediately raise the highest alert and take various measures to investigate the existence of wizards. Previously, the wizarding world could hide because ordinary people didn't believe in magic and wouldn't use high technology to investigate. But when governments around the world use all their latest and most advanced technology to search for wizards, it will be much harder for the wizarding world to hide. This is exactly the result George wanted. Voldemort's role was to instigate a war between wizards and muggles, then defeat the muggle army before becoming the savior and eliminating Voldemort. Finally, for world peace, and for the peaceful coexistence of muggles and wizards, the two groups would be united to establish a new empire. Rufus, take everyone and use magic to drive the muggles as far away as possible to avoid accidentally harming them. Things have come to this point. I need to find a way to subdue Voldemort first, otherwise he'll destroy the entire city. George gave the order to Rufus, then spread his wings and flew into the air, transforming into a giant several thousand meters tall. This really feels like Ultraman fighting a monster. George's real body looked at the dragon-like manifestation opposite him and couldn't help but sigh inwardly before unleashing an Ultraman kick. Immediately, the skies above London witnessed a scene of a giant, several thousand meters tall and radiating white light, battling a dragon-like monster. The dragon-shaped monster spewed flames from time to time, while the giant emitting white light waved his hand, unleashing streaks of blue light and lightning. The scene was incredibly exciting. Chapter 499 Deadpool arrives. December 17, 2024 Author, Kakagal. You're supposed to protect those muggles and wizards below? How are you going to fight me? A deafening roar echoed through the sky as George, in his true form, was violently struck by a dragon's breath of fire, his massive body crushing a large section of buildings on Oxford Street. Fortunately, the muggles there had already been driven to other districts by Rufus and his men. Minister, seeing George fall, the Aurors gritted their teeth in frustration, but there was nothing they could do. As spectators, they could clearly see that the minister in his giant form was no less powerful than Voldemort in his dragon form, and might even have a slight advantage. Unfortunately, the cunning Voldemort, whenever at a disadvantage, would turn his attacks towards the city below. To protect them and the innocent muggles, the minister had no choice but to use his body to block the attacks. After several attempts, his body was clearly severely injured, and he was on the verge of collapse. Giant, stand up. The muggles in the city, seeing George fall, all prayed silently. Through their conversation, they learned that the wizard, disguised as a dragon, was clearly intent on destroying the city, while the giants were there to aid them. Voldemort, you won't succeed. Struggling to his feet, George clasped his hands together, countless bolts of lightning flashing across his body. A terrifying pillar of lightning shot skyward, striking Voldemort in midair. Struck by the lightning, Voldemort let out a deafening scream. He then reverted from his dragon form to his normal human form, his furious roar echoing through the heavens. Fine, George, you can do it. I, Voldemort, will not give up. I will lead the wizards to rule over muggles, making those lowly muggles our slaves. Leaving behind these harsh words, the disguised, severely wounded thought form vanished. His true form slowly shrank back to human shape, swaying as if about to collapse. Fortunately, Rufus and the others arrived in time to catch him. Minister, how are you? I'm badly injured. The magic I just used has also messed up my magic. I might need to be unconscious for a while to recover. The Ministry of Magic's affairs are in your hands now. Remember, don't let anyone know I'm injured. That way, Voldemort won't dare to act rashly. He was also seriously injured this time. After saying that, George rolled his eyes and pretended to faint. From then on, his real body would remain in a state of feigned unconsciousness. Meanwhile, the Voldemort impersonated by his mind would be wary of his real body after this battle and would lead the Death Eaters to other countries like America. The wizarding world would be exposed, and the various national ministries of magic would be scrambling to deal with Muggle governments, causing a lot of conflict between wizards and Muggles. At this time, the Voldemort impersonated by him could take the opportunity to recruit wizards who hated Muggles, fighting against the various national ministries of magic while crushing Muggle governments. His real body only needed to continue pretending to be unconscious, and when the world was in chaos to the point he wanted, he could appear as the savior and sweep everything away. This wouldn't take too long, at most a year. While Harry Potter's alter ego was busy with the Age of Empires project, George was also encountering some issues in the Marvel Universe. Love. This magic is somewhat similar to Larkage's lust magic. Inside the floating island of the Superpower Academy, George was studying the love magic he had just acquired from the Department of Mysteries. The Department of Mysteries' development of love magic was only in its early stages. At most, it could block the killing curse, and not every time. However, through his research, he discovered that this magic had great potential. Whether it was Larkage's lust magic or the Department of Mysteries' love magic, upon closer examination, it wasn't just simple mental magic. It was more like a special kind of law-based magic above mental magic. If one could thoroughly understand it, one could even reach the level of a demon god with just one of them. Specifically, this type of magic is similar to the 7 deadly sins in mythology, possessing immense potential. George, there's some trouble at school, we need you to come over. Just as he was engrossed in his research, Professor X's voice suddenly rang in his mind, causing him to show a hint of confusion. When he was in seclusion researching magic, he told Professor X not to come to him unless it was something extremely important. Shortly after dealing with Thanos and returning to Earth with the Power Stone, the Nova Empire sent a fleet with great fanfare, offering the highest standards of assistance to humanity in its journey to interstellar space. During this time, high-ranking officials in various human governments naturally engaged in infighting and created numerous problems. However, in the face of absolute power, all conspiracies were laughable. He didn't even need to lift a finger. The teachers at the Superpower Academy and the Nova Empire worked together to handle them all. Now, humanity has begun its initial integration into the universe. Although migration hasn't begun, many wealthy and daring individuals have embarked on space travel. At the current rate, it's believed that in a few years, Earth will be fully integrated into the universe, just like other planets. At that time, a large number of humans will migrate to other planets, reducing Earth's population and significantly delaying the maturation of the celestial embryos. So what unexpected situation could have occurred that warranted Professor X's urgent request for his personal intervention? Was it an invasion of Earth by the Skrull and Kree empires? Or had Hela escaped from her seal prematurely? Or perhaps Galactus had appeared? With a swift movement, George appeared in the school's main conference room. "Professor, what happened?" George asked Professor X, who stood at the front, noticing that almost all the teachers were present. Professor X pointed to several corpses in strange uniforms on the floor, his expression grave. "Logan is missing. We checked the security footage." 5 minutes later, George learned from the professor what had happened. Just moments before, Steve had gone to find Logan and discovered several strangely dressed men in Logan's room, cleaning up the corpses scattered on the floor. They dragged the bodies one by one into a strange portal. Steve couldn't ignore this, and after questioning them without getting an answer, he tried to subdue them to get to the bottom of things. The men were decent fighters, but only at the level of top-tier special forces soldiers, no match for Steve. However, the metal rods they wielded were incredibly powerful. During the fight, Steve dodged one of their attacks, and the rod struck another man, who vanished instantly. After a brief struggle, realizing they couldn't defeat Steve, the men jumped into the portal and escaped, leaving behind several uncollected corpses and a few metal rods. Steve reported the situation to Professor X, who immediately retrieved the previous surveillance footage. The footage showed a strange figure in a red bodysuit carrying two knives first appearing through a portal and entering Logan's room. Shortly afterward, a large group of people in special uniforms also appeared through a portal and entered Logan's room. Chapter 500 Necromancy. December 19, 2024. Author, Kakagal. It's Deadpool and the Time Mutation Bureau. After reviewing the surveillance footage, George already had his answer. The strange man in the red bodysuit carrying two long swords was clearly Deadpool. And those in strange uniforms who could enter and exit through portals were from an organization called the Time Mutation Bureau. The Time Mutation Bureau is a special organization that manages various universe timelines in the Marvel Universe. It's powerful. After all, they can easily erase an entire universe using advanced technology. Even multiverse-level beings might not be able to destroy a universe so easily. They only need to press a button. But it's not that powerful either. The staff and guards are just ordinary people from various universes. They don't have any special powers. Their combat relies almost entirely on their high-tech equipment. Without that equipment, they're nothing. You could think of the Time Mutation Bureau as an ordinary person holding a nuclear button. He might be helpless against a tiger, but if he wanted to, pressing the nuclear button could kill countless tigers. The original Time Mutation Bureau was founded by Kang, a survivor from the future. Kang, who invented a time machine, traveled to different parallel universes across various timelines, resulting in countless branches and countless Kangs within the sacred timeline. These countless Kang battles culminated in Kang's victory, and to protect his own timeline, he founded the Time Mutation Bureau. The Bureau's existence prevented the proliferation of branches that could cause time to collapse and prevented further Kang wars. Later, Loki from one of the branch timelines was captured and, after a series of events, replaced Kang as the god of stories. From then on, the different possibilities across timelines no longer needed to be censored, and the Time Mutation Bureau's workload decreased. They shifted their focus to monitoring various timelines to prevent individuals who possess time manipulation abilities and use them to travel between worlds. This included Deadpool, mentioned earlier. Deadpool, whose real name is Wade Wilson, is a mutant with different experiences and appearances in different worlds and timelines. For example, in this world, Deadpool was once Wolverine's teammate, but was later modified and controlled by General Stryker, and had his head severed in a battle against Wolverine and Sabretooth. There's also a Deadpool from another timeline in a different world. After retiring from the military, he became a mercenary, fell in love with a dancer, but unfortunately contracted cancer. To treat his cancer, he was tricked into human experimentation. Although he was eventually cured and gained healing abilities comparable to Wolverine's, he was disfigured. He eventually achieved revenge and rekindled his relationship with his girlfriend, but unfortunately, she was killed by his enemies shortly after. Fortunately, he obtained Cable's time travel device, allowing him to travel from the future to the present, save his girlfriend, and change much of history. However, this attracted the attention of the Time Mutation Bureau, leading to his arrest. It seems Deadpool is looking for Wolverine, wanting Wolverine to become his anchor in his world. According to the Marvel movies and TV series, besides the sacred timeline, any branch timeline or parallel universe that extends from it will have its own anchor. Once the anchor of a universe dies, that universe will slowly perish thousands of years later. The anchor in Deadpool's universe is his own Wolverine, though he's dead. A mid-level leader at the Time Mutation Bureau named Paradox dislikes the current regulations and wants to use a time shredder to prematurely end Deadpool's universe. For his lover and friend, Deadpool steals the Time Bureau's time travel device and chooses suitable Wolverines from various universes to anchor in his own. It seems he just happened to arrive in their universe, found Logan resting in his schoolroom, and then encountered the Time Mutation Bureau, leading to a fight. Let's see if he's been captured by the Time Bureau or sent to the Void. This Wolverine is his friend, and he'll definitely help rescue him. Besides, he's very interested in the Time Mutation Bureau. He also wants to get his hands on those devices that allow travel between different universes. After all, with his current strength, he can't yet travel across the multiverse. Necromancer reappears, crouching down. George points his finger at the forehead of one of the corpses, and a green pentagram magic circle immediately appears on the corpse's forehead. A moment later, the corpse opened its eyes, somewhat dazed. The magic George was using was one of the necromancy spells he had learned from the Necronomicon in the apprentice world of magicians. It could summon the souls of the dead back to their corpses and then control them to aid in battle. Of course, the soul of the dead could not be reincarnated, or the original corpse must at least still exist, even if it was just a skeleton. Otherwise, the necromancy would not work. In the Marvel Universe, the souls of the dead generally go to the realm of their respective dimensional lords, or, if they have no faith, return to the embrace of the goddess of death. There is no such thing as reincarnation. Therefore, the souls of these deceased Time Mutation Bureau guards could be summoned back through necromancy. Would doing so offend those dimensional lords or the goddess of death? He didn't think so. In the Marvel Universe, there are also methods to summon back the souls of the dead, or even to resurrect the dead. Basically, unless it's a particularly important person, an existence of the goddess of death's level probably wouldn't care about a mere ordinary soul. And those dimensional lords, even if they did care, wouldn't leave their own dimensions to come to Earth. The Ancient One is still alive and well. The goddess of death here isn't Odin's daughter, but rather the one of the 5 primordial gods, a being on par with eternity. Actually, it's uncertain whether there are even 5 primordial gods of death. That's a comic book setting, and his world is the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's possible that the 5 primordial gods of death don't even exist, only Odin's daughter Hela is the goddess of death. Therefore, he wasn't worried when using necromancy. Let me see your memories. Controlling the resurrected necromancer, George unceremoniously read its memories. A moment later, he withdrew his hand, dispelling the necromancy, and said to Professor X and the others, "I know where Logan was taken and will bring him back. You can continue with your classes as usual. Have another teacher cover Logan's classes. He should be back this afternoon if all goes well." End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.